welcome to another Clutch Burners podcast. This is your home for stick shift drag racing, stick shift tech, and super cool stick shift dudes. And we've got a cool one today. But first, God, Rich Guido, you look good. Collared shirt. What are you in a fraternity or something?
I am. The only fraternity I'm in. The only one I need to be in.
And what fraternity might that be?
That's the Delta Lambda group, the Brotherhood of BTUs that Ben Strader hosts and keeps us entertained every Wednesday night. You should look into it and you should join it. And before we get any further, there's Bang Shift Billy over there. He's looking a little pale today, but I think that's just that Colorado air or something. and also tonight, once again, we have Ben Strader with us, who's been with us before. Since then, he has become the most winningest Factory X crew chief. I don't think there's another team that's won 3 Wallies as far as I know. So welcome, Ben, and thank you very much for coming back again.
Hey guys, thanks for having me again. I feel pretty special getting to be on Clutch Burners twice. Is that another record? Have you had a bunch of guys that have come on a bunch of times?
This is it. You're it, buddy.
Well, Rich has been on a couple of times.
True. Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
I don't count though.
Shows up occasionally, but no, I appreciate it. It's funny when you asked me the other day. I was like, man, they must be getting to the bottom of the barrel or something on guests. But I'm thrilled to come do it again. You know, it's a great podcast. Not only do I hear people out there talking about it all the time, but you know, I like listening to it because you have such cool people in there, and so yeah, it's cool. Great to be back.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your organization, EFI University? I know you talked about it before, but just kind of give us a healthy recap.
Sure. All right. Well, I'll give you the shorter version this time, just in case somebody wasn't around for the first one. But effectively, 20 something years ago, I went out and started the kind of school that I wanted to go to. And so ever since then, it's just been a really fun ride of we basically teach engine management, like EFI, obviously. And then over the years, that kind of worked its way into engine development stuff as well, as I was doing more and more engine development, contracted to race teams and things like that at a professional level. One of my instructors came to me at one point and said, I think we should do an engine building course. I'm like, engine building? Everybody knows how to do that. But I sort of listened to his advice and we started out in 2013 doing like an engine blueprinting course. And after a while, I kind of realized, that's not really the right thing. You know, racing engines are not really like blueprinting an engine is kind of like putting it all back to stock and factory stuff. And that's not really what we do with racing engines. And so now we have a race level EFI tuning course that sort of starts from the beginning, all the things you would need to notice to be successful with EFI all the way through. Like we started in the classroom and they do boot camp all week and end up on the dyno actually tuning. But we also do engine development courses that follow along some of the technology that we use in our professional categories, engine dynoing, spintron, machine work, that kind of stuff. But our school is unique in that it's very a la carte. We're super short-term classes because our target audience is really professionals that are already in the industry. You have a shop, you work at a shop, you work for a race team. So your time is limited, right? You don't have 2 semesters to go off to college and just kind of lollygag around. Those schools are great, but if you're already a grown-up and you have a mortgage and car payments and family and kids, that's never going to happen. And so all of our courses are a couple days to a week long, super focused, really small group size so that we can keep the conversation to a maximum and the distractions to a minimum. So you end up in a classroom with 3 to 6 other people, just your instructor and you, and we go at it pretty hard all week doing whichever, whether it's the tuning side or the engine building side. But EFI101.com is where you can find out all that stuff. And June was our 20th year in operation, if you can believe that. So no wonder.
Congratulations. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So super proud of that.
And a few of the folks that have been on this podcast have attended too. I know I talked to Tom, and did Mac go too, or was it just Tom and Blaine?
I know Tom and Blaine the Starks did. I don't know if Matt's been or not, or he might have gone to a class that I didn't teach or something, but Matt is an ally and thinks the same way. I know I met him personally in 2018 on Drag Week, and within about 5 minutes of talking to that guy, we're talking about Matt Blasco. Within about 5 minutes of talking to him, you realize like he's the real deal. He's switched on. He knows what's up. Like, I like that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that when I was chatting with Tom about the course, he was like, Blaine was getting it like this.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm like still trying to process, and Blaine's like 4 steps ahead of me. And
these young guys have an advantage, right? Like they're at school every day learning. And so they're already, their brain is, more elastic than us old guys. I gotta slow down and read it twice sometimes.
And same Alex and Dennis have also attended. Right?
Yep,
Taylor's?
that's Alex Taylor and Dennis Taylor came about a year ago right now, actually. And then, the coolest thing about that is they went out right after that and did, I think it was it drag week or sick week? It must have been sick week because it was in the early part of the year there. But, watching her go out there and sit in her trailer with her notebook from class and literally say, everybody leave me alone. I got to do this myself.
Yep.
And make her own tune-up on a, several thousand horsepower car, go out there and win the event. Like, for me, that was worth every single minute of the time spent with those guys. And now I have great, like, lifelong friends from it, so it's been a really cool 20 years of doing this because I don't really feel like, I don't know, I don't want to get all like sentimental or anything, but man, you meet a lot of great people and you make a lot of great friends in this business. So I like to tell people I don't really work on cars. I just talk about working on cars.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I would agree. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here with Rich if it wasn't for these drag and drive events and making friends. He's one of my best friends now and worst influences, frankly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you meet some of the best and worst people racing, right?
Oh yeah. And they're one and the same.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's not just drag racing because I've done lots of different kinds of racing in my career, and these monsters exist out there in the wild everywhere. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're going fast, there's going to be somebody that's a really wonderful bad influence on you. So,
yeah.
So you're kind of a big dog crew chief now. Talk to us about it. Tell us about Factory X. I'm super excited to hear about this.
Well, okay, so let's stop pretending about being a big dog and all that. NHRA started a new class this year in 2023 called Factory Experimental, and there's a lot of excitement around it. It was somewhat a letdown that we didn't have more cars available to race this year, but the cars that were out there were spectacular. They're beautiful cars. So Factory X is a category where the cars still look like real cars that you can buy. So they're modern muscle cars, Camaros, the Copo Camaro, the Cobra Jet Mustang, and the drag pack Hemis. And there's another class called Factory Stock Showdown or Factory Stock Supercar, depending on which governing body you race in. But they're same thing. They're super popular because those cars use modern muscle engines. They're supercharged, electronic fuel injected, big power. In that class, they use a 9-inch radial tire with automatic transmissions, and the cars are heavy, like 3,400 pounds, and they're wild to watch. Big wheel stands. They either blow the tires off or they get after it every time.
Rich,
So
did you hear what he said? He said 3,400 pounds was a heavy car.
Yeah, in our world, it's like, what are you gonna do with that, tow? But anyway, so the brains and the minds at NHRA decided we need another more exciting class to mess with, and so what they did was they took the bodies on these modern cars and they basically put them on top of kind of like a pro stock chassis, like a tube chassis, a real race car, with the exact same engines that are in the showdown cars. So these things, they're fuel injected Gen 3 Hemis, supercharged Coyotes, and of course the LSX engines. And they all make somewhere, I've worked on all of them on the dyno. I've done combustion analysis on the Hemi and the Chevrolet, and I can tell you they'll make let's say ish like 1,500 horsepower. But the X cars are cool because they only weigh 2,650 pounds. They also get a Liberty clutchless 5-speed, and they get a 33-10-5 tire.
You said a stick shift. Woo!
Charged EFI, smallish, medium-ish size tire. The cars are a riot. They're wildly popular with the fans. And so the brand new series started this year at NHRA, debuted at the Big Go, the U.S. Nationals at Indianapolis. And man, it was cool. I mean, it was rough too because it's such a long week, and we were such a small class that I felt a few times like we kind of got pushed to the side because they got to meet their TV times and all that. But every time we would go up there, the stands were packed. Everybody wanted to see the X cars. And then, immediately after we'd run, you'd have a flood of people in the pits wanting to check it out and ask questions. And so it's fantastic.
And sorry to interrupt, how many cars are in the series?
Currently, there's 5 cars that are actually done and running, with about another 6 or 7 that are super close. And to be perfectly honest with you, I think there was probably a few that could have been done this year, but probably wisely, a few of them said, "Hey, if I don't go to any of the races this year, I get all winter to test, and I get to kind of sit back and watch what happens." And so I think that might have happened a little bit. People just kind of wanted to really kind of understand the lay of the land before they jumped in. And I would, as difficult as the competition level was this year, I would expect it to be twice as tough next year. So
sounds like some of them are a little scared.
Yeah, I don't want to use the term scared, but let's be honest. There's a ton of dollars that go into making one of these things go, and you kind of want to show up with your best foot forward. So buying yourself a few months probably is a smart move. We just, we weren't smart enough to sit it out and wait. We wanted to show up and be the first to do this and the first to do that. So yeah, we got right in there.
Yeah, it's nice to know where the bar is set. 7.0 is kind of the bar now, so
for sure
they know what kind of testing they got to do and how fast they got to go. So they're not going to show up with a 730 car next year.
That's right. Yeah.
That's 8th Mile, right, Rich?
Yeah. So my involvement with the class started out probably by accident last year in December at the PRI show. Jeff Turk had his Blackbird X there on display at the PRI show. And, I was crawling all over it, trying to get a good look at it. And, Jeff and I struck up a conversation about combustion analysis and what some of the challenges of doing it are, what some of the benefits were. And so he invited me, by a way of, "Hey, can I hire you?" So I showed up early in the spring at Tony Bischoff's place with one of Jeff's engines on the dyno, and we got everything outfitted and spent 2 or 3 days there tuning on the thing. And at that point, that was kind of all I really had going on. I didn't, I wasn't like gonna do much other than that. And then early in this year, I guess it would have been probably January or so at the Engine Performance Expo, the Stanfield guys were out there, Greg and Aaron, kind of doing a father-son bit, and they kind of had approached me about, "Hey, it'd be cool if we got together and did some work, and you could probably help us with engine stuff." And so, one thing led to another, and I ended up out there probably early summer, I would say. I guess it would have been late spring, early summer in Louisiana doing combustion analysis on their stuff. So what was cool is now, without even being associated with one particular team or another, I now had intimate knowledge of the engine, the inner workings of the engines on at least 2 of the heavy hitters in the class. So that was kind of cool. I was kind of hoping maybe I'd get to do some tuning on one or something. And so lo and behold, then Greg asked me to come to Texas and do a test day with their brand new Camaro Factory X car, the Rod Shop Camaro. And we went out and did that and had huge success right away. And then so I went home and we started texting and calling, and as often happens, and then he kind of came out with it and said, "Well, I wanted to see if you'd be interested in something a little bit more permanent." And I'm so dumb, I kept being like, "I don't know, what do you mean, what are you talking about?" And finally said, "All right, let me spell it out for you. Can you be my crew chief?" And I'm like, I think I could. To be honest, I've never been an NHRA professional crew chief before. I'm usually just the guy with the laptop, and most of the time nobody listens to me anyway. They just tell me what they want and I do it, even if I don't think it's right. And so, Greg was gracious and said, "No, I think we could do great things together, and I would love for you to come on board." And so we did. We went out and tested again and had more success. And then we showed up at the big go, and it was a good time. We went home with the first ever Wally for Factory X at the U.S. Nationals. And man, that was like a high that you could ride for a while.
Yeah, no kidding. How many races did you guys have this year?
So there was supposed to be, so it started out there was going to be 8. There weren't enough cars done. So then they knocked it down to 6. The first one was supposed to be, I think, Kansas. And then it was going to be Brainerd and then on from there. Well, there just weren't enough cars that were actually done and ready. So Jeff Turk actually crashed his in testing early in the year. And so that knocked out, a whole big part of the class. They thrashed and they just couldn't get it ready in time for that race. And so To be honest, there was a bunch of drama between the racers and NHRA of when we should start and where we should start. And, there was a lot of pressure from the racers to let us go to Indy. NHRA really didn't want to do that. They didn't really have time and room for us. But we had eventually got our way and showed up there was 4 cars there. In fact, there was 4 cars at just about all the races this year because there is 5 cars, but logistically there was a race or two where like one guy couldn't make it, but the other guy did. And so, again, I'd like to see 10, 12, 14 cars or more show up next year and really watch this class grow. But this year it was almost like an exhibition year, to be honest with you.
So there was six races total then?
No, we only ended up doing 4 races. So we started at Indy because they when they couldn't do Kansas, then they said, well, it's only a week later and you got to go to Brainerd. So we're just going to kill that too. So then we were down to 4 races. So we did Indy and then Charlotte and then St. Louis. And then we wrapped up here a week or so ago in Vegas.
So you're only running 75% then. You only won 3 out of the 4.
Yeah, kind of a bummer. Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's amazing, actually. Yeah. Especially
It really is.
not being a crew chief before and a whole different level of responsibility. And could you tell us a little bit about Greg Stanfield and like what's his background? And
yeah, well, Greg is Greg and Aaron both are unbelievably skilled at their trade, both on the engine side and the car setup and control side. But I mean, one of the biggest advantages that I think I had going out there to get my feet wet as a crew chief rather than just a tuner was having such an amazingly confident and calm and thoughtful driver like Greg that could give us real feedback. Get out of the car. The guy's won something like 5 NHRA championships in various classes, and he's been racing since like the late 70s. And so, he kind of sees this class as his last hurrah. I want to do this and have fun and then kind of go out on top. And we're going to have a 3rd car here soon that his son Aaron will drive when he's not doing pro stock and showdown duties. So they're really excited, father and son, to get to race together. But Greg is an amazing wealth of experience and knowledge that I got to team up with and really, to be honest, learn from. Like I said, it was a bit overwhelming and intimidating to say, well, all the professional level stuff I've done in the past, people just wanted to hire me for my good looks and laptop skills. And so luckily I had lots of laptop skills that offset the balance there. But it wasn't really as far off as I thought it was going to be in terms of being a crew chief. A crew chief's really more about the leadership aspect and, getting the right people together and getting them to perform at a level that any one individual can't win the race, right? We all have to bounce each other. So, I had Ross Wilson, who works with us at EFI University as our clutch guy, also a very accomplished comp eliminator racer, really knows his way around the clutch housing. We had Brady, I think Barger is his last name. I never say it right, but this kid Brady did the back half. It was his first time doing it this year. And he was flawless the whole year. Like I told him that after Vegas, gave him a high five and a big hug. And I'm like, dude, you're my hero. Literally, the kid didn't make a single mistake all year. And, I'm not trying to like blow smoke or anything. Like he was thoughtful in his execution, right? Like I'd give him something to do and he would literally just go, okay, I'm going to do that to the best of my ability. Never complained, never saw him without a smile. So between him and Ross taking care of the car, Greg driving it, and then Scrappy, Mike Stanfield, Greg's brother, doing like engine duties, which really on these cars is next to nothing. I don't mean to take anything away from Mike, but change spark plugs once in a while, put oil in it, like just kind of the maintenance and safety stuff. But these are not high maintenance engines like a Pro Stock where every single round you're doing valves and things like that. So, going out there and being a first time crew chief for somebody like Greg, who I could he just inspired confidence in you, right? So he just handed it to me and said, just do your thing. I trust you. And I literally would do my thing and say, now go out there and drive it. I trust you. And we would argue and sometimes bounce ideas around. And here's what I think. No, here's what I think. But it was so cool to go out there and say, for 20 years, I've been tuning and I'm going to take all this logical, mathematical, unemotional approach to this class. And we're going to see what happens. And to go out there against some really tough competitors, there was nobody out there that was a slouch. It was not a gimme. And, I was joking the other night, some guys race NHRA their whole entire career and never get a Wally. For us to go out there and get 3 in 1 year, let alone the inaugural class, man, I'm still on cloud 9 from that. It was awesome. But I don't want to take any credit for it, right? Like, it was those guys that did the work, and Greg's knowledge and Aaron's knowledge, they just allowed me to be who I am, I guess.
The piece that I think people, when they think of you, they think about the EFI tuning. But as far as the chassis tuning goes, how did you attack that this year? Being a crew chief, did you really relied on those other guys, or?
For sure. I mean, again, it would be foolish for me to go out there and think that I know everything, right? Like, I got lots of ideas and I got lots of things that I'm pretty sure are right. But we have a saying around the shop: belief dictates vision. So if you're not careful, you'll only see the things you really want to see, right? And so I really had to work hard this year to just check my ego and say, this is what I think. What do you think? And, and get Greg in there and Aaron there to look at it. And there were a number of times that I would have probably done something chassis wise. I'm talking about, 4-lane shocks, whatever. I would have probably said, yeah, we're going to do this. And Greg would be like, look, I don't disagree, but like, why don't we take this more conservative approach? And so, we probably benefited from that wisdom and experience more than it looks like on the outside. I definitely don't want to take the credit for everything. That said, I think if you were to say what, you take a guy like Greg, who's got so much experience and so much knowledge. So what do I got? What am I going to bring to the table? A lot of what I brought, I feel like, was the experience on the tuning side from documentation and taking notes and referring back to those notes. Whereas Greg's got, 35, 40 years of just knowing what to do. And he had so much up here that it was almost difficult for him to get it out. He's more of like, just get out of my way and let me do it and it'll happen. And that's great, but it's hard to pass that along to the rest of your legacy, right? Your teammates, the people that are going to come behind you. And so I wanted to bring a much more logical, mathematical, sort of detailed approach. And I feel like I was able to do that, and that he really appreciated it. So it just worked out really well for all of us.
Yeah, and the good looks.
Well, obviously.
And the data-driven decisions. Like, I laughed when I was in Vegas, and I'm like, why does it look like there's a potentiometer on the steering wheel? Because there is. And yeah. If the car goes left when he shifts gears, it's like, yeah, every time you shift gears, you're turning left. But if you don't have that data, and that's probably one thing that these cars have. Now, did they restrict you on anything with regards to data input, or is it they restrict on using data in the control scheme?
Correct. So we are not restricted really in any way on how much data we can collect. It's just that very little of that data can be directly connected to the EFI control system. So you can collect as much as you want. You can think about it and make decisions and whatever, but you're not allowed to have like real-time ECU control over a lot of that. Like, let's say, for example, drive shaft or shock data or ride height or steering input and things like that. So they really wanted to make sure there wasn't traction control, and that was kind of the way to do it. So what
is the EFI system on those?
So the class is actually sponsored by Holley EFI, and so therefore all of us use the Holley. I would say, I don't know of anybody that's not using the Dominator ECU instead of like you could use a HP, or you could probably even use the Terminator X's if you wanted to. But the benefit of the larger Dominator is just, again, more data. And so we have so many things that we can look at and do and process. I can't imagine anybody not using that ECU. So
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what works out really nice about that is you sort of end up with 2 data loggers then, because the ECU itself monitors every single channel that it has. And then you've got all these external log channels going to our race pack. So that was really cool to compare things. And I'm a real nerd about it. I take the existing data and then combine pieces to make math channels and calculate new pieces of data and all that kind of stuff. So I really enjoy that kind of stuff.
Did you see any, when you compared the data logging from the race pack and the Holly, did you see any differences, or were they reporting pretty much identical points of data?
Well, for example, one of the things is you dump all of your Holly data out of the CAN bus over to your race pack and collect that. That way, when we're in a hurry, I can pull the race pack data and I can look at pretty much all the important kind of engine parameters quickly, oil pressure, air temps, boost, all that kind of stuff, But it ends up being a little bit behind, a little laggy. So if you were to compare direct RPM in the race pack compared to the logger in the Holly, you'll find that it's a little bit behind just because of the way the data transfers, but not to any significant degree. I mean, if I was in a pinch and I lost a RPM sensor on my race pack, I could just as easily rely on the one in the Holly or any of 20 different examples of that. So that's small differences, but nothing really significant. And most of the time what I would do is if we had a problem, like for example, in Vegas, Q1, we went out there, Rich, you were there for that. And I'm just going to be honest, man, I had it turned up, man. We were looking for the other end of the ball field, swinging for the fences. And I think I said something to you like, hold on, this is either going to go down or it's going to, annihilate it. And that thing went out there about 10 feet and it shook the tires so hard I thought the back window was going to come out of the car. So he had no choice but to push the clutch in. Not sure if he was wearing his football mouth guard, but he probably needed it for that one. But the next round we went out and I was only to a slightly lesser degree swinging, less because the weather was great. We had the conditions to go out there and put a big number up. And so we were kind of, clenching our teeth. And the car left really good and it went about 20 feet and then it just shut off. And so I was like, oh, I actually thought it shook again. I'm like, man, there's no way with that tune-up this thing shook again. And anyway, he came back to the pits. He said, no, the car actually shut off. Well, what we had found was it had shook so hard the first round that it actually, one of the power and ignition wires had come loose out of their fitting because the car shook so bad. So then we had to thrash because there was only 3 qualifiers. And, we had to thrash and take some screwdrivers and nuts and, wrenches and sockets and go through every single wire on the car now and make sure. So then I went out there with a fairly conservative tune-up to make sure we could qualify in round 3. And I don't know, I forget we were on 704 or something like that. And that kind of put everybody on notice for the air that we had, which was about 110 correction. Everybody thought you should not be able to go that fast, but we were like, well, I kind of warned you that we could. So we were happy with that. It was good.
I'm gonna back you up a little, and maybe we'll dive into it later. So maybe don't go too deep into it. But so you were mentioning that when you first kind of got into this, you were doing combustion analysis. That must be for emissions. Is that what it was, Ben?
Yeah. Using a 5-gas analyzer and emissions test lab. Yep.
Making sure we're burning all the fuel.
Right. We don't want to waste any.
No.
So
go ahead.
Well, so I assume you're going to ask about combustion analysis, right? So you go ahead.
Well, and I'm in the loop a bit because of, I'm part of the Brotherhood of BTUs, but it's really pressure analysis in the chamber that you were doing for Blackbird X and then for the current team, right?
Yeah. So for those that aren't familiar, what that means is we have these tiny little sensors that are really high pressure and high speed. They use a little piezoelectric crystal that vibrates when the pressure is applied to them, and that then gets converted into a voltage signal that we can read. But we go in and we drill through the cylinder head at the deck. So you basically have to sacrifice a set of heads. You don't have to. You could plug them and race them later, but most guys have an R&D set. But what it allows us to do is go in there and examine the pressures all throughout the 4-stroke cycle, like every single degree of crank rotation. So you're up there doing 10,000 plus RPM, and every single degree of crank angle or more, we're logging the combustion pressures, and that allows us to then plot them out and do all kinds of really amazing stuff with it. Not to mention just get the tune-up on point for every cylinder.
So this is on all cylinders. You have these sensors in there.
That's right. All 8 cylinders. So pretty quickly, one of the things you realize right away is that we're not tuning an 8-cylinder engine. We're tuning 8 one-cylinder engines because none of them behave the same, and they definitely don't behave cycle to cycle the same way. So I think the last time I was on here, we talked a little bit about how the tune-up changes during acceleration. But even just statically on the dyno, all 8 cylinders are doing different things at different times. And being able to do the combustion analysis is a way of extracting the most performance out of the engine, but also getting us the highest level of safety and reliability at the same time, which previously you just tuned to the weakest cylinder and kind of accepted that as your go-to, tune-up.
So now you can tune every cylinder for fuel and timing to try to even it out as best possible.
Yeah, and you're never going to take your worst one and make it as good as your best one. You just want to take all 8 of them and make each one of them be as good as it can be. But I don't want to short sell the value of combustion analysis on just tuning, right? Because that to me is kind of the real low-hanging fruit. But as you get into, you get all done, you have this tune-up and the engine runs, what's the first thing the guy says? Well, how do I get more? Yeah. And so looking at the combustion pressures throughout the cycle, it's not just, everybody tends to think of it as how much cylinder pressure you made during firing and combustion. But don't forget, we also get to look at the pumping losses through the exhaust stroke and through the intake stroke and compression and expansion. And so there are all these other mechanical things that we can learn about the engine as we change intake, header, camshaft timing events, so on and so forth. Even things like friction analysis, right? If we make a change to the piston, we can measure the actual power and torque that's made inside the cylinder, and you can compare that to what shows up on the dyno, because what's the difference between those two is all the friction and losses in the engine. So when we're doing combustion analysis for the purpose of engine development work, it goes a lot deeper than just getting the best tune-up. So I could spend days on that subject alone, so I don't want to short sell, oh, well, if you do this, you can get a good tune-up. You absolutely can. And we learn like what to do, for example, in different conditions of the engine. So that's why look, I don't want to brag, but we were really good this year when we'd go out under different weather conditions. You go out and have 104 correction, 106 correction, 110 correction, and we always ran good. And it's not luck, it's the consequence of having all that data.
When you say 110 correction or 105 correction, what do you mean exactly?
Okay, so let's take drag racing, for example. When I go to a drag strip, one of the things that I want to know is what is the actual elevation of the strip that I'm going to race at above sea level. The higher you go in elevation, the less performance you're going to have, right? It doesn't matter, NA, boosted, whatever. However, there's a thing, Bill, that's called the adiabatic lapse rate, where if you look at what the barometric pressures and temperatures are at sea level, and then you look at what happens to them as you go up in elevation, there's a slope that's called the adiabatic change in slope, the adiabatic change in pressure or temperature. But the reality of the situation is the world that we live in is round. And so because the Earth is rotating on an axis that's not parallel and perpendicular all the time. In other words, if you think about where the sun is, the rays coming from the sun.
What? It's not flat.
No, well, part of it is, right? The part I'm sitting on.
Okay.
Every step you take, you're getting a little lower, right? But anyway, the rays that come down from the sun, where we get our thermal energy, don't strike the Earth exactly the same everywhere. So you get more heat energy at the equator than you get at the North and South Pole, right? That's why it's cold up there. But it's because of that unequal distribution of thermal energy that we have weather patterns. So what happens is, as the hot air is rising and the cool air is falling, if you were to get into a really tall elevator or maybe a hot air balloon, and you go up and every 1,000 feet, let's say you took a sample of barometric pressure and temperature, what you would find is that at any given time on any given day, the actual recorded pressures and temperatures wouldn't be the ideal. They wouldn't match that adiabatic slope. And so because of that, we have a thing called DA, or density altitude, a lot of people have probably heard of. And that is, I might be standing at a racetrack that's, let's say, 2,000 feet above sea level. So theoretically, the temperature should be X and the pressure should be Y. But because of the weather patterns on that day, I might have a different pressure and temperature than I should have theoretically. And so what we do is we look at all the factors like humidity, barometric pressure, and temperature that affect the weather. And we look at how far we are away from ideal at sea level. And so when I talk about a 106 correction, what I mean is that I would roughly be 6% worse than if I was racing at sea level on a perfect day. And so you could basically take your dyno sheet that's always given to you, calibrated to sea level, and divide it by your correction factor, and you can pretty accurately get that day's real amount of power available. So in other words, if I got 1,000 horsepower and I say I got a 106 correction, right? I grab my little calculator here. Let's see what we'd get. So if I take 1,000 horsepower and divide it by 1.06, what I'd have is now I only have 943 horsepower actually available. So my car doesn't know what the barometric pressure is or what the temperature is. It just knows that I don't have as much pushing me down the track as I used to. And so as the weather changes minute by minute throughout the day, we have a weather station on top of the trailer that we watch and record. And we talk about that correction factor. So if I say I'm 106 or 103 or 110, it's how far percentage-wise that I am away from sea level.
Got it.
I'll tell you, the worst I've seen is I left Bill's once, Matt Blasco and I, and we went over the Eisenhower Pass, and the barometric pressure was 67 kPa. And it was hot, and the fuel was like evaporating on us. We're like, you can't make it over this pass. The fuel was it was hot enough that the fuel was vaporizing, and there was no barometric pressure. And huge.
We were doing some off-roading year before last, and we were up at Imogene Pass there outside of Telluride, and
Imogene.
And I think it's up there around 10 or 11,000 feet or something like that. But the density altitude that day was like 15,000 feet. So your car thinks it's at 15,000 feet, regardless of how far above sea level you actually are. Maybe it was 12,000. I don't know. It's up there.
Yeah.
There was a couple dudes riding on some bikes going up to the top, and I'm thinking, holy cow, these guys are studs, man. Like, I get out of breath just getting out of the truck and walking to take a pee. Here's these dudes riding bikes. Well, then they came up, and I realized they were e-bikes. I was like, oh, come on, man. Like, I can do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what I was getting at, though, was the performance of the vehicle changes a lot with weather. And so you have to be able to predict what kind of changes to make to your tune-up. And when I talk about tune-up, I'm not just talking about EFI, but the whole car.
Chassis, clutch, all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is Clutch Burners podcast. So let's identify that right now. If my engine makes less or more power, then it immediately affects the way the clutch performs. So if the clutch has more slip, then it immediately affects the way the four-link and the shocks work. So a good tuner, I hate to use the term crew chief, like, I'm crew chief now, right? Like, so listen to what I say. But a good crew chief or a good car tuner understands these relationships and how they work hand in hand. And I think that's why we were able to have a lot of success this year, because of that sort of logical, mathematical approach to, well, the engine's doing this, that means the clutch needs this, and that means the four-link and shocks are going to do this. And, couple that with the experience of going out there and looking at and being able to read the racetrack and understand what it will take and what it won't take. Man, we just did a good job at that this year.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I love the knowledge, the taking the empirical data and making it work, like, to change everything. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, and it really reinforced, like when I visited you in Vegas, like the sheets that you create to write down all the data, every pass, plus as well as the spreadsheets that I'm sure are in the background and all that information that's on the computer. But even just the act of writing it down on a piece of paper and having that book of knowledge that the group next year that are just joining won't have is another huge advantage too, right? If you're in Vegas now, or you haven't been to Bandimere, I guess you won't be, but that variety, when you have that data, sure helps.
Yeah, I mean, and it takes a ton of discipline to do it, which is why so few racers do it, because the reality is you go make a run and you get back to the pits and your brain's going 1,000 different ways, thinking about all the things you want to check and test and look at and change and do for the next one. But it takes me a solid probably 15 minutes of, we have established a routine. The car goes down and I get on my little motorbike scooter and I head back to the pits, and the guys get in the golf cart. They go get the car and the driver, and they get the time slip, and they go to the scales and weigh it. And then, I usually will ride down and meet them somewhere halfway back and get the little recording chip out of the data logger so they can do their thing. And I can be back in the trailer starting to get all that data. So I get all of the relevant data from the vehicle, as well as the weather and the clutch setup. And, I write down where my shocks were and what gear ratios we had, and on and on and on. You saw the sheet there. it's a serious commitment of time when you really want to be doing all these other things, right? But if you don't do that, it will cost you later. I'll give you a great example. Vegas, we blew the tires off that first round. We shook the second round, and it's like, okay, I now am in a position where I'm the only guy really that hasn't gone down the track for Q3. I got to make sure we go down. So what I do is I go in there and I look at our weather station, and I take my little motorcycle up and look at the track, and I go, okay, here's the conditions that we have to race in. So I go to my logbook and I flip back through. I'm like, hey, check this out. When we were in Charlotte, Q1, we had identical weather conditions, right? And we had identical car setup to that. So I went in there and put the clutch there and the ratios here. And, I literally copied my formula from E1 in Charlotte. In Charlotte, it went 704.4. We went out there in Vegas and went 704.5. It went within 1,000th of a second because I put the exact same tune-up in the car from the front bumper to the rear bumper. And it was like, that was the reward of the discipline of taking all those notes and having that data.
That is impressive.
When you go up and check the track, do you use a tool, or are you just going up there and with your white New Balance shoes and you put them on the ground and give it a little twist?
Yeah, so if I twist and the Velcro from my laces comes undone, then I know it's good, right? So both, actually. I need to make my brain kind of have sanity. There's certain things that I look at when I'm up there, but we also use a professional service. We pay a guy to give us hourly updates of the track from the beginning of the day till the evening, and uses a machine called a keg meter up there. And it measures the actual tractive force on the track in newtons. So we get an actual force, as well as the track temperature in several locations. So, for example, we'll look at what is the grip of the track in physical newtons of force, say 7 feet behind the starting line, 20 or 30 feet ahead of the starting line at the 60 foot, and then maybe 150 feet out, right? So we keep track of all those pieces of data. But I'm also out there looking at, which way are the flags blowing? So where's my wind coming from? Do I have a headwind, a tailwind, a crosswind, a quartering headwind? Where's the sun? A lot of times late in the day, the sun's over on one side of the track or the other, and you got the tower or the stands are blocking it. So you got one lane that's got full sun and the other lane that doesn't. So the temperature of the track changes. So I go up there with a little temperature gun in my pocket, and I think about that and look at all those details. And, some of that's just experience of learning what to look for. But when you lose, you get a lot of experience. So I've done a lot of that. And, experience is what you get right after you needed it. So
a couple of questions. Is there a data logger that will automatically upload to the cloud or via Bluetooth so you don't have to pull a chip, meet the car and pull the chip?
Probably. I don't know. Probably. It's just that the sort of de facto standard for drag racing tends to be race pack. And so part of that is, I hate to say it this way, part of that's monkey see, monkey do. Part of it is it's a really great system. If it ain't broke, don't break it. And part of it is, if I go out here and find the super whammy high-end data logging system from Pi Research or, Motec or whatever, that's perfectly legal and I could use in the class, then all of a sudden I'm out on an island. And if I need spare parts or tech support or whatever, there really isn't anybody that's going to help me. So
fair enough.
To be honest, there hasn't been a lot of motivation to go looking for new stuff simply because what we have is working.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say,
Bill, you looked really frustrated right there. Like you really wanted to ask something.
I did, but I'm being really polite too. That's all the stuff I'm mentioning.
So unlike you.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the dude that's providing you with the track data. Does he do that for a bunch of the teams? Like,
yes,
everyone pays this guy for that information? And
yeah, from Top Fuel down, those guys. Some of the big teams have their own guy that does nothing but that, but for the most part, there's 2 or 3 guys out there that provide a professional service to multiple teams. And so we try to take advantage of that. And it's, he's sharing the same data with everybody, right? So it's not like you have some top secret thing. But there, it's kind of like if I wanted to remodel my bathroom and came to the time to do the drywall, just because I know how to do it doesn't mean I want to. I'm going to hire a professional and he'll be in and out in 3 days versus 6 weeks. And I'm in there telling my wife, I know, I'm going to get to it. Okay. So I really believe in using the quality of professionals anywhere you can.
I didn't know that there was that service. That's very cool. That's
yeah. Kurt Johnson and Jake Green are a couple of the guys that are out there on the circuit that go to every race and do that stuff. They're very, very experienced track prep guys. And so they know what to look for, and they're really helpful.
That's awesome.
And the tool they use, it's a kegometer, and it has nothing to do with beer. Is that correct?
I'm sure there was some beer involved when they invented it. I don't even know what that stands for. KEG. I don't know what the letters stand for, but we get our keg numbers. I do know they're in newtons, and that's helpful for me. I would say most people it's just a number. So you go, oh, it's 2,700 or it's 3,100. It's just some number. But to me, that's actual newtons of force, and that plays into my hand because I'm always calculating the available force that my car can produce as well. And so we try to relate those things together. Like when I talk about math channels, I have built specific multiple channels upon channel. So you got a math channel that calculates an estimate of the engine's airflow everywhere on the track. Then I have another one that measures things and calculates the density of the air. And then I have ones that use those two together to give me an estimate of horsepower. And then I have ones that take the horsepower and work backwards from RPM to get torque. If I know torque and gear ratios and tire sizes, I can get force at the track. And so I use those math formulas to show me how much force the car potentially could have and compare that to the available grip, as well as when I'm setting up my clutch. What does the clutch have the ability to hold in the car? And so I think when we start looking at clutch setups in terms of actual torque input and resistance output, instead of, I don't know, we just put 3 grams on it and a half a turn of base and we kind of hope for the best, like everybody sort of starts out doing that. But I think when you start making it mathematical, the magic part of it goes away. You know what I mean? You can see exactly what you need to see. I think what you find is you can go in there and look. Like I could show you where I made mistakes on the track in Vegas all weekend, especially that very last run we made to win the race was haunting me all weekend. It was bittersweet. I went out there specifically, biting my fingernails going, okay, I got the weather. I know we could go in the 6s and be the first team to ever do it. I think our competitors knew it as well. Just based on the conversations I was having in the staging lanes with like Jeff and AJ, and I could almost hear it in Jeff's voice. This like, yeah, I know you guys can. And they hadn't really brought their best engine that weekend. They'd heard it the week before. And so, but the thing is they weren't slow. Like they went 7:10 in the round just before. And I'm like, well, so I went 7:04 and they went 7:10. That's not a huge, it's not like I could just go out there and be stupid. So if I try to swing for the fence because I want to go 6s and be the first to ever do it in public, man, you could certainly miss and spin the tires. And I get paid for Wallies. I don't get paid for bragging rights. So I had to set the car up and try to make a choice of like, okay, the run before we just went 7:04. Based on the weather, I know exactly what I could do to put a tune-up in this car that we go out there and go 697 or 698, like absolutely no problem. And I'll be honest with you, I looked at what they ran the run before and I chickened out. And I said, I just can't go after the 6s right now. I'm going to go somewhere in the middle and hope that maybe I get a tailwind up there and I get both. But I have to focus on what my job is, and that's to win races. Yeah. And so we went up there with, a really good tune-up. We went 7:02 in the final to win the race, and everybody's high-fiving. And I felt like I was sad on the starting line. I felt like my shoulders were down, and I'm like, who wins a freaking Wally and is sad about it? But I really wanted to go 6s. And to be honest, I kind of thought it was gonna, even though I knew I didn't have the kill tune-up in, I really thought it was gonna. And when it didn't, I was a little bit like it was a bittersweet win. I wanted it, but I went home and I was like, man, I got to understand what happened. And so by going through the data logs and really understanding what the engine was doing and what the car was doing and everything else, I realized that I had altered the EFI side of the tune-up in such a way that it had added, I'm going to use rough numbers, in the neighborhood of about 60 foot-pounds of torque. And so what that means is I did not, because we had a good run before, I didn't really make any changes to the clutch. And so the clutch locked up at a higher RPM, which means it slipped longer than it had the run before. And look, it all worked out. We went 7:02. But the difference between that 7:02 run and potentially a 698 or a 699, about 2 grams of counterweight would have gave me that 60 pounds I needed. So, history's history. You can't go back and do it again. But you learn something from every single pass because you have the record book and the data, and you can go back and compare the differences.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm a big math fan. I like that. So you were talking about like temperatures on the track. I kind of want to rewind just for a second. So when they're measuring the track with the kegometer, and I think it's like kinetic extra grip or something. I don't know what it stands for.
Yeah.
But like they're measuring, I've seen this thing. That's the thing that they twist with their foot on it, right?
Okay, so no, that's different. So that's like the torque meter where a guy will stand on it, you turn. It's basically a torque wrench with a needle, and you can get how much rotational grip you have. But that's not the same as the keg meter.
Okay.
So the keg meter almost looks like a, you remember like from the 80s, like Ghostbusters, and they had the thing with the ectoplasm, and you'd suck the ghost in there, and you'd carry it around as like this square box with a handle on it.
Yep.
Well, on the bottom, it's got a little tread-like track on it, almost like a miniature like rubber army tank track. And you set the thing on the ground and you kind of hold it there, and it tries to move that tread, and then it comes up with a reading of how much force it took to do it. So,
okay.
So the one you're referring to is more of like a twisting force, where this is straight line force.
Okay. And then, like, I know you guys are doing a lot of data collection, but like things like track temperature, tire temperature, like talk about tire temperature, because certainly you have an infrared sensor for that too.
I do, and I'm going to have an unpopular opinion about this, Bill. I'm going to tell you to take that sensor off your car and throw it away. And here's why. So if you look closely at what happens, I go out there and I do a burnout. And during the burnout, my tire goes from about 115 degrees or so to about 420 or 430 degrees really quickly. And then you push the clutch in and you get the thing neutral and you kind of inch your way up. And, you know, the guys back there setting the wheelie bar and your crew guys are flapping the doors to get the smoke out, all that kind of stuff. And if you look 30 to 40 to 50 seconds later, by the time you finally get into the staging beams, my tire's right back to 115 degrees. So really what I've kind of learned from that is you do a burnout for two reasons. One, to clean all the crap off the tire. And two, to lay down two tracks of rubber that you're hoping are straight enough that you can line up in and use. But as far as getting the tires hot, it's not working. It's not doing that. And so, yes, we look at tire temp, but honestly, that's not a huge thing for me based on data, right? Not my emotions. Just after looking at it enough times, I'm like, well, that's stupid. It's me doing a big John Force 300-yard burnout is doing nothing other than wasting life of the tires.
But it's cool. Come on.
It is cool. The fans love it. So there's value in that. Yes. But in terms of pure just racing advantage, that's not it. It's not there. Now, track temperature, on the other hand, is a completely different ballgame.
Yes.
It's a case of when you're on a cold track, more heat is better until it's not.
There's a window where you want to be in. If it's too hot, it's greasy. If it's too cold, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. So for me, on that kind of stuff, the window is somewhere around 80 to 90 degrees. You're starting to go, hey, this is really great. About 100 degrees is the sweet spot. And from there up to maybe 120 or so, you're doing pretty good. But as it starts to get hotter than that, like in Indy this year, I think we had 145 degree track temp. And I mean, it felt like you were going to walk out there and fall down. You know, sometimes you go on a track and it wants to take your shoelaces off. It felt like you could skate around out there and fall down. It was almost downright slippery.
Really?
And so, yeah, you want to talk about like a massive difference in the way you have to set the car up to get your car to go down that stuff. You better be paying attention, you know, as a car setup guy.
So let me ask you something else too. So you said on the setup in Vegas, you had the tune-up making 60 more foot-pounds of torque, which would have, in a perfect world, necessitated a little bit more counterweight to bring the clutch in faster. Now I know, like Rich, he modulates, instead of changing base or counterweight, he changes the two-step. So if he brings the RPM up, and I don't even have an adjustable clutch, but I've learned so much from you, Canadian Chuck Norris. If he raises his launch RPM, it's going to bring in the counter faster because it's already starting off with more counterweight. Do you guys do some of that same thing, or do you just strictly?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, absolutely. In fact, those are some of my my tools that I can use when I'm up on the starting line. Is I have knobs that we can open the passenger side of the car and reach in, and so my crew guy Brady looks for a signal from me. I stand up there. I put my foot down where I want him to do his burnout. He does his burnout. I move out of the way, hopefully before he crashes into me. And then when he's backing up, I'm looking for where I want to put him in the beams on the starting line. Brady's on the other side of the car with the door open, getting the smoke out, and Ross is waiting for him to stop. So I bring him up and, stop him. And then I hold the driver's side door open, partially to give him some air and partially as a signal to the driver of when it's time to start staging. Ross sets the wheelie bar, and when he's done, or during the time he's doing that, I look over and I yell at Brady and give him a signal. I want up 1 or down 2 or whatever, and he's got a knob that he can turn for me. And every click of my knob gives me 100 RPM of starting line RPM. And so then, of course, I have a record of how much torque that changes and how much counterweight that changes. But in the case of 60 foot-pounds, 100 RPM won't get you there in terms of counterweight, especially at those lower RPMs where we're leaving, right? So when you have a clutch that locks up at 8,200 RPMs, let's say, raising your RPM from, say, 5,500 to 5,700 or from 6,000 to 6,200 isn't enough counterweight to make the difference. So now you're stuck with, okay, I could go in there instead of counterweight, I could crank in, say, a quarter turn of base. If it gives me, using easy numbers, let's say I get 200 pounds for a full turn of base, well, a quarter turn to give me 50 pounds. And I could do that. But I also need to look at how much clutch clamping force I have during the gear changes. And so in the case of the, armchair Monday morning quarterback of my Vegas run, I could see that not only was it light on the starting line, but it was light at the gear changes too, because it was making more torque. And so to me, that means I needed counterweight, not base.
So did you see it? Did you see a noticeable bigger flare on the gear changes because it was slipping?
Yeah, and it wasn't like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Like I said, it was the difference between a 702 and a 698, but 0.04 of a second, when it matters,
For sure.
I could just see in the data, okay, do I want to change base or counterweight? And since, raising a couple hundred RPM wasn't going to do the trick there. And again, this is not my opinion. This is all based on real data. My math channels very, very accurately calculate the power and torque of the engine at everywhere during the run. And I use all these formulas to calculate based on airflow and fuel flow of the engine. But then I have a scaler that also looks at your ignition timing because, lots of guys do power management and stuff and you take timing away. So just because you have, 10 pounds of boost and 6,000 RPM doesn't mean you make the same power you made on the dyno if you've got 5 degrees of timing out of it, right? For example.
So this car is supercharged. It's blown, right?
Yes.
So that what you just said is an interesting question. And Rich and I have talked about this too, because I have found, especially with small twins, which is what I have on my setup, when I try to manage power or use traction control, which I don't use a lot, but when I do, I've noticed that when I pull timing to reduce power, it only works for a very short amount of time because all of a sudden the motor loves that, or the turbos love the retarded timing, and it starts building more boost.
Yep.
So it only works for a little bit because if you pull the timing for too long, it just starts making more boost and then it makes more power.
So that actually makes my argument for why I'm so careful to have all this in my data, because I think over the years, people have found one of the tuning tools for getting a car to leave softer or harder is ignition timing. And people have confused ignition timing manipulation with power management, right? But as you just pointed out, the amount of timing you make on a turbo car could very much affect how much boost you get and therefore power. So if you're not looking at the power or torque, which is really the same thing, just factored by a number. If you're not looking at actual power the engine's making, you could easily be deceiving yourself into thinking your tune-up's one thing when it's doing something else, which is exactly why all of my data logs have these math channels that show me real power.
Yeah, and one of the things I would add too is, we've talked about this a lot, and I get made fun of because I have a whole flower pot full of twisted input shafts. But with not having a slipper clutch that has no give on the shifts, it twists input shafts. So what I've done is when I cut the ignition, when it comes back on, I'm pulling about 25 to 30 degrees of timing for a quarter of a second to kill the power. But what I've seen is there's almost no, or actually even a bump in boost when it does that. Now I do think that, I have seen that killing that ignition timing on the shifts has definitely reduced the frequency of input shaft replacements, but it's also, the turbos are not having to recover after like they do on a big dip. And that's been interesting. So it's like a win-win almost.
Yeah. And some of that's due to just the inertia of the turbocharger wheels and shaft. It's kind of hard to speed them up and slow them down really quickly, and kind of a herky-jerky start-stop type thing. So they're kind of happy to keep cruising along at the RPM they were if you don't do anything to screw that up.
And I think that small twins is going to be a different scenario than a larger single, because there is a lot more mass and inertia that you have to speed up or slow down in a big single versus smaller twins.
Yeah, in fact, most of the time what you see on a big single is it surges really bad on the gear changes. So what'll happen is you're going along, if you're looking at the actual turbo shaft speed, you're going along, and let's say I pull up to, like everybody else, 10,000 RPM. Then all of a sudden I change gears and I lose 25% of my engine speed. So it falls back to 7,500 or $8,000. Well, the mass flow of the engine just went down significantly, but this big giant compressor wheel is still trying to put it all in the engine. And so you would think, oh, my compressor is going to slow down. Most times if you're looking at the compressor speed, it does not slow down. In fact, it speeds up. And the reason it speeds up is it's in surge. It loses its grip on the airflow, and so there's nothing to stop the wheel. And so it will increase in speed tremendously, and then it will come right back down just as fast. And so that's when you tend to damage the turbochargers a lot, is when they surge in and out, because you'll see, like I've got data logs where you'll be going along at, 100,000 RPM of shaft speed and do nothing other than change gears. You didn't even close the throttle. So you just change gears and the engine speed dropped, and now all of a sudden the airflow is mismatched. The turbo speed will go from 100,000 to 200,000 and back in less than a quarter of a second. So you're talking about 400
When you
RPM.
say surge, and you said it loses grip on the air, is that like cavitation? Like I'm thinking of a boat prop. Is it cavitating in air?
Exactly like that. Yes.
Interesting.
So when the turbocharger is surging, when you look at a compressor map and you look up that y-axis on the left-hand side there, that pressure ratio, what you see is that the turbocharger can only achieve a given amount of pressure ratio, and then the mass flow stops. So that line is curved up to the right on a compressor map, because as you go up in pressure and down in flow, those two things happen simultaneously. So as the pressure gets really high, the flow just drops off. Think about if you were spinning your turbocharger and you just took your hand and put it over the outlet, the pressure would get really high, but the flow would get really low.
Right.
And so that wheel has to spin. It just kind of cavitates or loses traction in there. So when you do a wide open throttle gear change, typically the turbocharger will increase in speed and then decrease in speed just as rapidly.
God, Rich, this dude is a smart mofo.
I don't know about that, just experience.
Got some data.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's data.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've talked about on Wednesday night was like the first, I can't remember how much it was the first 10 turns of the tire and how critical it was. You want to touch base? Is that one of your math channels that you have, or you? Yeah.
Yeah. Let's clarify. It's not really the first 10 turns of the tire. It's the first 3 turns of the tire. If you haven't got the thing under control by the first 3 turns of the tire, you're really not going to do anything to save the run. It's not going to be a good run. After the first 3 turns of the tire, you can just about do whatever you want to that thing. And if it's under control, it's going to stay under control. Now, what I mean by that is, again, the sensor that most people use is drive shaft speed. And a lot of tuners / crew chiefs, when you talk to them about stuff or you show them a data log or whatever, the first thing I always say is, oh, let me see what your wheel speed was at a quarter second. I'm like, well, you don't know what my wheel speed was because you don't know what my differential ratio was. You know what my drive shaft speed was. So what happens if I take my 488 out?
Wait, are you going to get to a math channel? Is that where you're going?
All I do is live on math channels.
Yes.
If my drive shaft speed's, whatever, give it a number, 1,000 RPM, my wheel speed is something less than that, depending on what your differential ratio is. So if I take my 488 out, put a 513 or a 528.9 or a 538 or a 550, well, then my wheel speed is different. And so I have math channels that look at the drive shaft speed and they divide by the differential ratio to give me the number of RPMs that the wheel speed is. But that's only speed. That's not actual number of turns. So you have to use a little calculus and do an integration. So you integrate the wheel's RPM speed over any period in time, and you can work backwards to actual total number of tire turns, right? And so during a quarter mile run on a 33-inch 10.5 tire, you're only going to see about 145 to 150 rotations of the tire. I mean, if you think about it, that's about a 105-inch rollout. So 145 times 105 inches divided by 12, you can figure out how many feet that is. You only got to go 1,320 feet. So there's a lot of inches in a 105-inch rollout. So when you've only got, let's say, 145 total turns of the tire, you have to make the best use of them that you can. But I'm going to let you in a little secret. I'm going to pour some of my secret knowledge out here and share with stuff maybe I shouldn't be sharing. But we also have a laser ride height sensor that's on the housing of the differential. And the reason it's on the housing is when the housing goes down, the only way that could happen is the diameter of the tire changed.
Yeah.
So I need to know the actual duration or the actual diameter of the tire during the run in order to do this. Because you can see the car squat in high-speed video, man, you'll lose 2 or 3 inches of tire diameter at the initial hit. And then depending on how your shocks are set, you might get some tire bounce in there. So we'll see anything from, it's a 33-10-5 tire, but I'll see anything from 27 5/8 to 36.5 inches of tire diameter as it goes down the track.
And you're sometimes on a bias ply, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a radial doesn't do that nearly as much, but because of that huge change in diameter, the circumference of the tire is changing all the time. So I calculate the circumference of the tire or my rollout of the tire in real time based on that data. And the math channel just integrates and gets all that for me. But the real point of this whole discussion is that I'm looking at the first 3 turns of the tire. So, for example, it might take you, I don't have real numbers in my head, but I could probably get close. Let's say that it takes roughly about 0.8, but between 0.7 and 0.9 seconds, right, for the first rotation of the tire. The next 2 rotations of the tire will probably happen in between 1/2 and 3/4 of a second. So the rate of change in tire speed is happening really rapidly at the start of the race. The first one kind of takes a little bit, and man, they're coming on strong after that. So that means if you don't have the tire under control by the second or third turn of the tire, you're not getting it under control. The thing's going to stand up and look like a top fuel tire, and you're going to blow, or you're going to shake it, you're going to blow the tire off, and you're done.
Okay, so then that leads me into this question, which I think you're going to get to. It's a 2-part question. It's a double header.
Ooh, let me get a pencil.
A, how long are you slipping the clutch for? And how many tire rotations is it before the clutch is engaged?
Oh, is that
one? I have to be careful here. You never know who might be watching this.
Or listening.
Right, yeah. How about if I talk about on average, not specifically a Factory X car?
Fair enough.
On average, a high-powered bias ply tire, you're probably going to be slipping for somewhere in the neighborhood of between 0.7 and 1 seconds before the clutch locks up. So again, so I'm going to bring up an interesting thing that my buddy Aaron White and I were talking about the other day, is that I really feel like to get the most advantage out of a multi-stage clutch like this, where you've got a base and then a counterweight that applies leverage as you go up, you almost need an engine with a wider power band. So you want to, when you've got a situation where you let the clutch out at $5,000 or $5,500 and you go up to $10,000, I get a much more forgiving window to work with than if I let the clutch out at 4,800 and I only go to 6,800 or 7,200, right? Because now my counterweight has to act in a much narrower window, which means to get it to react, I tend to have a faster moving lever shape and a greater amount of counterweight. And that brings its own set of problems with it. But generally speaking, on a real race car where you're actually going to move pretty hard and you want to, separate those, if I'm going to leave at $5,000 and I'm going to lock my clutch up at 75 to 8,500, let's say, is your window, you're probably going to need to be slipping for somewhere between 0.7 and 1 second. The less, the better if you can get the tire under control. But man, there are a lot of factors with instant center and 4-link and shocks and all this stuff that affects your ability to do that, and track condition. You
know why this gives me a big smile? Because as you know, it's not an advertisement, but I have that digital clutch controller, and I have a lot of customers reaching out to me because they're having trouble with initial settings and everything else. And the delay point is kind of where it goes to where the clutch starts to engage. And I have a ballpark number for that is just a wild ass guess. And it seems to work for a lot of people, but the slip point, I always tell them to start at 0.75 seconds. And to hear you say that, it just makes me feel great. I'm like, Woo! It was a great guess.
Vindicated.
Not really. That's kind of what some of the testing data has shown. But like some of the guys have knocked, like no joke, a half a second off their ET using a 3/4 of a second of slip time, and sometimes they get that delay point right off the bat. But yeah,
and that's gonna change depending on how you have the car set up, weight bias of the car, and instant center. If you've got a really short and low instant center, like a lot of ladder bar or factory, like Mustang, factory kind of 4-link cars where it's a real short, the car tends to react really fast and violent. So you need a little more slip like that. If you've got a 4-link and I can get that thing way out there and long and off the ground a little bit, you don't have to slip it as long because you get a lot more leverage farther out, 20, 30 feet out. The car's really levering. And so I can get that clutch locked up and add power to it. But there's a lot going on there chassis wise that's going to affect what they have to have. But I would say that 3/4 of a second it's a real good place to start.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree.
Well, one thing we didn't talk about is tire, so slick, slip percentage. Is it like 10, 15% all the way down the track? Or is it hooked up? Is it dead hooked pretty well?
It's not all the way down the track at all. Once you get going, I would say it's a big slope, right? You're going to have, whether it's tire or clutch, something has to give at the starting line. Yep. So obviously we would like that to kind of balance between the two. Your 10% number is probably not that far off at the beginning, but I would like to be about half that by the time I'm at the big end of the track, especially on a car that's going fast, 200 miles an hour. But there's always going to be a little bit if you're going to be going fast. You're never going to have them. The front and rear wheel speeds are not going to be equal if you're going fast.
It's compared to like radial cars now where, you're pretty much dead hooking the tire, and if it slips, you're game over.
Yes,
but,
that's right.
Big tire slick cars, substantially different. Even probably a 28-10-5 is probably similar.
Absolutely.
Are you allowed to run a radial in your class?
No, everybody, it's a spec tire. So that 33-10-5W is the tire that we're all on, and
everybody's on it.
Yeah, and it's a challenging tire for this class. Like it's a good tire. It can take a lot of abuse, but it's a little on the finicky side for tuning. If you, as Rich was just pointing out, if you kind of try to pussyfoot it and dance your way through the 60 foot, you're just going to dead hook the tire and it wants to like stop the engine and yank the clutch out of the thing. If you go, all right, screw that, I'm going to get after it, then you end up with like what we had there in Vegas Q1, where it'll shake the back window out of the car. There's actually a great photo of, I think it was either Indy or Charlotte, where Alan Johnson went out there and they were kind of swinging pretty hard, and the door came open about 30 feet out. It was shaking so hard it like knocked the door off the latch. So
wow,
it is unbelievably violent in the car when you get that thing shaking. It acts like a big Top Fuel type tire. You get about right out there around where the Christmas tree is. It's then all of a sudden just things get hairy. So it's funny. I was thinking about reliving that Q3 monster hit that we made out there in Vegas, and I remember because we just hadn't gone down the track in the previous 2 runs, and this is our last chance. Otherwise we qualify last. I remember him letting the clutch out, and I was looking down at the tire track, specifically trying to read the tracks. And I don't think I ever looked up until I heard the car get into second gear, and I was like, oh my God, thank you. And then I looked up and I'm like, all right, we're good now. Like I had to get through that first 3 or 4 rotations of the tire or we were not going to get down. And so I was listening and watching the tire tracks, and it was like my heart was pounding, and once he got into second gear,
going like this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Once he made it to second gear, I knew it was game over. That thing was going down. So, and it did.
So that's a clutchless shift, in that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So a Liberty clutchless 5-speed. Yep.
Nice.
And so those shifts tend to be fairly violent too. Like you talked about taking timing out to protect your input shaft. On a car like that, where you're on the ragged edge, you can knock the tire off if you have ratio splits that are kind of big, right? So that's all affected by clutch, suspension, and rear end ratio too. Like, let's just use a number like a target of 14-1 is what you might want for your gear ratio on the starting line, or 13.5 or 14.5. That's total ratio. First gear in the trans times the differential, right? Well,
I'm not even half that probably.
Well, I'm just using a number, right?
No,
So
yeah,
let's
fair
say my car's 14-1. Well, I still have to get from whatever ratio my first gear is all the way back to 1-1 when I get to high gear. So if I've got a 5-speed, and let's just use numbers like I'll use like Robbie Blankenship's car, so I don't get myself in trouble on the X car, but Robbie's NA car will typically run something like a 550 rear gear and about a 275 low gear. So that puts you in the neighborhood of about 15-1 starting line ratio. But being 275, I've got to step from 275 down to probably something like 205 or 206 second gear, which means I got to get down to about a 160 or 164 third gear, and then you're about a 125 to 130 fourth gear. And so those steps that you're making are decreasing the engine speed, but increasing the drive shaft speed, hence wheel speed. And if you're not careful on the gear change with a clutchless trans and you're on the ragged edge, you can knock the tire off at the gear change. And so as we put more ratio in the car, more differential ratio in the car, it allows me to get to the same starting line ratio, but with lower first gear ratios. That way I can have less percentage of slip through the gear. So I'm typically gauging the weather for what the most amount of rear end differential gear I can get away with to prevent myself from having huge gear change splits like that. Sometimes you can't, if you got a bunch of, really good weather, well, I can't go faster. But in that class, in the Factory X, we're only allowed 10,200 RPM. So I would be on the rev limiter at 1,000 feet if I tried to run a 550 gear and I got 103 correction air. In 107 or 108, I could run a 550 and go through it, 10,000 or 10.1. Well, like in Robbie Blankenship's car, we'll go out there and put a 550 in it. We'll have 103 air and we'll go 10,800 and not care. Right. So it really is strategically what you can live with on a particular package for the vehicle. His car's wildly different. It's naturally aspirated. It's a ladder bar car. It is a Liberty 5-speed, but it's a high winding, naturally aspirated small block rather than this big, giant, blown LSX thing that makes 1,000 foot-pounds of torque when you're trying to let the clutch out. It's tough. It's a totally different strategy.
I just did some math, and my ratio is 10-1 starting line ratio.
That's not terrible. That's also a car you're trying to drive down the road, right? Not a pure take it off the trailer and go racing.
True.
Can you talk a bit about that and talk about the Factory X piece? But like when you dump the clutch, and let's use a slick car, I know that the Billy on Street Racing Channel, like he talked a lot about folding the tire over on the initial hit, pulling a bunch of timing so you don't lose the tire, and then ramping it back in. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to confusing ignition timing manipulation with total power management because especially in a supercharged or a blower car, you have more than just timing, right? Like engine RPM that you leave the starting at is going to control boost because it's pulley driven. So when I'm changing my starting line RPM, I'm changing the total power output of the engine, not just how much counterweight I get. So that being said, there are times when you have no choice but to artificially reduce the engine power with timing. But again, on a stick shift car, that gets real dicey because if you're not careful, you're coming back in with your timing and basically putting all this power back in the engine at exactly the same time your clutch fingers are applying. And if you get those things lined up, all of a sudden you end up with a ton of power and a ton of clutch and you got no tire. So there's a real fine line between wadding that tire up and looking, pancake flops out there and standing it up like, Big Daddy Don Garlett's top fuel tire and getting it skinny and tall and blowing it off. So somewhere in between those are really, really good 60-foot times. And I can't tell you that I have the magic formula for how to get those every single time, but the thicker my notebook gets, the better at it we get.
Yeah, it's honestly a piece that, so I went to Sick Week at the beginning of this year, and the tracks were flypaper. Like, I don't know what they would be on the keg meter, but
like 3,200 newtons.
Deep. Yeah. And it was very easy to manage a 4,000-pound car with 1,500 foot-pounds of torque. But, it gave me this false sense of security coming back. And the radial tires, I struggled. And then when I went on Death Week recently, same thing. We were on a couple of sketchy tracks there. And I did figure out that, if you don't get after it and get some vehicle speed before you put the power in, then you're going to knock the tire off every time. And
Yep.
First couple of days I did that, and then I increased the boost back up and was hitting the tire harder to begin with to try to get the vehicle speed before application of power, and I was making better progress for sure. But definitely need to take better notes and describe all of that stuff. And I played with the timing retard a little bit before I was hitting the tire real hard at the beginning. And, obviously it's another tool that you can use, but you better keep some good data if you're going to start doing that.
And one thing I want to point out there is I really like the language that you use when you talk about vehicle speed, because I think there's way too much talk in drag racing about wheel speed and not enough about vehicle speed. Because if you don't have enough vehicle speed and you try to get more wheel speed, it's not going to work, right? So we need the balance between both. You have to have the car in motion in order for it to be able to apply all this power you're about to bring in. And that's why it's so sensitive to, ignition timing manipulation is one of those things that, like, if some is good, more is definitely not better. If I took away 5 degrees and the car seemed to go down a little bit better, taking away 10 or 15 generally is going to make it worse, because now all of a sudden you get this sort of like, huh, and then the car starts to roll and you're like smashing the power in at the same time, but you don't have any vehicle speed. It just wants to rip the tire off. And so you definitely have to be careful and find the balance there between, again, total power management and vehicle speed, rather than just looking at drive shaft speed and assuming wheel speed.
This real smart guy in Vegas used that language, so I just copied it. This guy is like the most winning crew chief that I know.
I got it.
Yeah, that's where I got that language from, and it made a lot of sense at the time. So it stuck with me that, it really is vehicle speed we're talking about.
Rich,
I'm happy to hear.
How many crew chiefs do you know, Rich?
Just one, actually.
Just the one that matters. Just the one that matters.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a dubious title to be the winningest crew chief in Factory X when there's only been 4 races. But hey, we did win 3 of them. So until somebody knocks me off, I guess I'll accept that title.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It feels very undeserved, though. I mean, it was almost like you go out there and race with guys like the Stanfields. It's like, man, all they did was make me better. I'm so grateful for that opportunity, because they were just terrific to work with, and can't wait to go out and do it again next year. But I definitely got benefit from working with them, probably more so than the other way around, them from me.
So,
and Ben, go ahead. Your turn this time, Bill, and then.
Well, I kind of wanted to go back to the clutch, and I know that we've talked about this before, but I want you to elaborate on, and Rich and I have discovered this ourselves kind of on accident, but clutch discs batch to batch. So you want to buy the whole batch because they're consistent, but talk about how a 5135 from one batch isn't really the same as a 5135 from another batch, and what you've learned from that.
Yeah, and I really can't even tell you why that is, because you would think, if you're going to buy cakes at the bakery, they use flour and sugar and eggs and you know what I mean, and milk, and they make batter. But man, it only takes a little tiny change in the batter, or in how hot the oven was, or how long you kept it in the oven, to make a subtle difference. Now, in a cake, it's probably not that important.
Or even where the disc is in the oven.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
because of the oxygen flow through the oven.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there just are differences in the manufacturing process. And so we hardness test ours. We've even had some discussions about getting a sample from the clutch disc manufacturers, like a little puck, and then kind of keeping that throughout the season to gauge against everything else we get. That's an area that we're progressing at and getting better at identifying that. But we struggled early on in the season with exactly that program, where we had some clutch material that just all the markings were the same. It just wasn't the same. And so now I think what's happening is we're getting better at identifying when that happens. We can see right away what to look for. We cut our clutches every single round. We take the clutches out and we shave them a little bit to make sure they're straight and flat. And so, right away when you cut it, it doesn't look right. It doesn't sound right. It's like, okay, hold on. Let's go get some new discs instead of cutting these and putting them back in there. So by the way, Rich and I did like a 15-minute long video when he came to visit on Death Week. He stopped by the pits for us in Vegas in Factory X. And I got out our spare clutch, one of our multi-disc adjustable clutches, and we kind of talked about and went through and showed Matt Blasco as our infamous cameraman. And so it's not a very fancy or polished edited video or anything. It was just two dudes standing around talking about how the clutch works in one of these things. And so I've tried twice to upload it via my phone, Rich, and it hasn't quite worked yet. That's why I wasn't stalling you. I just hadn't got it on the drive yet, but I'll get it on there this week and you can share it to the Clutch Burners kind of audience. But I think it was fun, right? We went through and showed up close and personal what the inside of one of these clutches looks like and how we treat them. And so hopefully you guys will like that.
Yeah, I've got a video of cutting one of the discs too. And it's pretty interesting to see, when it makes its first pass, that there's, a centimeter in the middle of the disc that it's not touching. And so you wonder, okay, what caused that? Like, was there some deflection or, and I know that I've shot myself in the foot before where I'd come back from sick week this year and I thought, I'll just throw a new disc in and expect that everything's going to be the same. And even though I only had 0.015 off the disc, I really should have just shimmed it and put it in because I know how that disc performs. Because throwing in a brand new disc, you could get a whole, where a quarter turn was the right amount. Now it takes a turn and a quarter to get the same performance. So
that's frustrating.
What's the same but not the same? Yeah.
So can you share what disc material you're using and what manufacturer, or is that not something you want to get into?
I will tell you that we run a variant of the 5191 compound, but it's not exactly that. So we have some top shelf, super secret whammy throwdown stuff that we've been working.
So are you requesting a formula change from the manufacturer when you get to that level?
I don't want to make it sound like we're that complicated. It's more like, hey, what do you got? And they kind of go, hey, we got this stuff we've been doing with some pro teams and we want to, do you want to try it out and blah, blah, blah. So I couldn't even tell you what the exact what their cake batter is. I just know that they've got some stuff that they want to R&D and they'll ask, do you want to try this? And so again, that all goes in our notebook. This is what performed here and this is what performed there. And, we're building that database as we go. Yeah.
Manufacturer?
98% of what's out there is either Ace or Bonifanti.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So one of those.
Yep, or one of each if it's a twin disc.
Yep. We have not on the X car, but on other programs we've even mixed and matched and tried stuff there. But the key is to have documentation and notes. Like without that, it's just emotion. You just think one's better, or you like one better, or one makes you sleep better at night. But the bottom line is, if you don't have data, you just have an opinion.
Yeah, and I guess my personal experience, I run an Ace 5135. And out of the other 5135s, and I would guess they were Bonifantes, I'm not sure, but the Ace ones tend to be more of a coppery color, and Bonifanti is more like charcoal gray.
Yep.
And one is way more aggressive on the hit, and it's horrible on the street to drive because you need some slip. And the other is fairly tractable on the street. It squeals a little bit, but that's not a big deal. But it also lasts about 10 times longer.
Bill, you wouldn't need near as much slip if you had more ratio.
That is true. That is true.
You're out there at 10-1. Yeah, no wonder you'd slip, right?
Yes, but with more ratio, it is then more dependent on the chassis working. And
for sure. And when you got a 4,000-pound car,
so.
when you got a 4,000-pound car, that gets hard.
Well, Rich has a 4,000-pound car.
Oh, okay. You got a ballerina.
3,700.
Oh gosh. Imagine that. That's 1,000 pounds heavier than our Factory X car. We're 2,650.
Yeah, Yeah, we look at our current nemesis in race week, Chris Hine, and he's adding weight to make the 3,000 pound, and it's dramatic. I mean, the difference in 8th mile, especially, it's just crazy.
Yeah. In Death Week, he didn't have to weigh 3,000, so I don't know what he was weighing, but I know he took the front plate off, so he was probably 2,900 pounds.
Yeah, that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
It's just so much easier on everything.
Oh yeah, no wonder you have all those flower pot of twisted input shafts. You're trying to move that giant car.
No. That's Ford power. Come on.
Right. Yes, that's right. What was I thinking? Yeah.
A couple quick questions about the engine. So it's not dry decked, right?
No, it's a normal like LSX water block.
Yeah. And so
we're talking about factory X, right?
Yeah.
Cometic head gasket, or what head gasket do you guys use?
Yeah. MLS, Cometic style head gasket in them. Again, these are the factory showdown engines. So there's a part number piston and a part number connecting rod, and you're kind of a little bit free on crankshaft, except for like stroke and sizes off to be the nominal values for stock. But
427?
No, 363.
Oh,
they're 350s, but the rule book allows you a certain amount of overbore and a certain amount of extra stroke, and so everybody takes advantage of that. About 360 inches.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Chevrolets get the TVS 2650 blower, the Eaton Magnuson, whatever you want to call it. The Fords and the Dodges both use a 3-liter Whipple with various pulley sizes and things like that to kind of get parity throughout the class. But on average, most of the cars are making just somewhere north of, say, 1,500 horsepower.
Crankshaft.
Yes, crankshaft.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and not much loss through a Liberty.
How much loss is there? How much loss?
I haven't measured it on an X car, but I've measured the Liberties on a lot of other cars. And have we talked about percent versus power before? I can't remember.
You and I did on a separate conversation, but I want you to talk about it now.
Okay. So one of the things you always hear is guys go, well, if you dyno your engine, then you put it in the car and you put it on chassis dyno, you're going to lose X percent of power. You're going to lose, 15 to 20% if it's a stick shift and like 25% if it's automatic. And that may or may not work out to be true for your combination, but it's one of my pet peeves because I own an engine dyno and 2 hub dynos and a roller dyno, and I do a lot of dyno testing. So I feel like I have a fair idea of how this stuff works. And the reality is the amount of power loss that you get through the drivetrain is never a percentage. I mean, it is after the fact if you want to calculate it out for your car. But the way I like to think about it is, let's say that I've got 1,000 horsepower engine on my dyno, and I put it in the car, and I put it on the hub dyno. So there's no wheel slip. So it's just, losses through the drivetrain. And let's say it makes 800 horsepower. So there you go. That's 200 horsepower loss. That's 20% power that I lost. The problem is it's only 20% for that specific package, because if I take the engine back out and I go put a couple turbos on it, now it makes 2,000 horsepower, and I put it back in the car, I'm still going to show 1,800 horsepower because it took 200 horsepower to turn the drivetrain, not 20%. It doesn't now take 400 horsepower, right? So it's not percentage, it's raw power. And so I did this experiment back when I had my Fox body Mustang. We had an engine that we were using in the school as part of the competition engine development program, where the students could come and learn about how to, build a racing engine, like not a rebuild, not a blueprinted engine, like an actual competition engine. And this thing had like regular 241 or 243 heads on it, I think it had on it. And it made like 778 horsepower, right, on the engine dyno. Pretty religiously, this thing would make 778 on the engine dyno. And so we took it and we put it in this little Fox body Mustang I had. And at the time, I didn't have much experience driving stick shift drag race cars. So we put a power glide in there so I could get used to sorting out the suspension and the chassis and all that. And then after that, I put a Liberty clutchless 5-speed in it. Well, 778 horsepower on the engine dyno. We put it in the car with a regular, a typical loose converter and a power glide transmission. And the most I could coax out of that thing ever was 596. So you take 778 and subtract 596. There's your horsepower. I think what is that? 182 horsepower is what it took to make the car go. And that's between converter slip, any potential slip in the transmission, and just parasitic losses, right? So we went and drove the car for a while, had fun with it. Didn't take very long before I was like, all right, this is boring. I want to put the 5-speed in here. And we put the Liberty 5-speed in it. And we put it back on the hub dyno. And I did not even hook up the laptop, right? All I did was take the converter and the automatic out and put the clutch and the 5-speed in it. And, we bring it up. And just like on the automatic, you get in high gear, you whack the throttle. And the very first pull, without doing any tuning whatsoever, the very first pull, instead of 596, it made 707. So that means I only lost 80 horsepower versus 182. My Liberty was a free 100 horsepower for the car. And so I get the idea that you get torque multiplication in the converter and all that other kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong. But the dyno is still the dyno. And what tractive force you have available at the wheels went up by 100 horsepower. So I don't like to talk about power loss as a percentage. I like to talk about it as a number. If I took 80 horsepower worth of loss and I took my 778 horsepower, engine out of there and put in a 1500 horsepower engine, it doesn't suddenly take 160 horsepower to turn my transmission and differential. So I tend to think about it as total power loss, not as percentage. It's just one of my pet peeves.
No, that's yeah. It actually makes me feel better about my engine components, knowing I'm making 1485 to the tire and thinking,
yeah. I mean,
20%. That's a lot of horsepower at the crank. That you think you're, that makes total sense because it should only take a certain amount. And the other thing you and I talked about was part of the reason that you guys run a Liberty. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I love G-Force, but not a G-Force, is because you have 2 counter shafts instead of 1.
Yep.
And it's less horsepower. It takes less horsepower to turn it.
Yeah, there's just, and I love G-Force too. I love Leonard Long. He's one of my most fierce competitors in the NA10-5 class that we run with Robbie Blankenship's cars. But while we duke it out on the racetrack and literally do anything to beat each other, in the off season, we call each other and talk on the phone, and he builds cool special parts for me and things like that. So I love those guys. I love that transmission. It's just not the same as a Liberty though. When you just have the main shaft and the counter shaft, versus on a Liberty, you have the main shaft and then 2 counter shafts. You're splitting the load into those 2 counter shafts, right? So the amount of force that those gears are trying to push away from each other and the bearings have to retain in the casing and the housing, you're just going to have less loss in the Liberty than you are in the G-Force. And so it's probably really small, like we're splitting hairs, but when you're trying to get it all and you want every little bit, that's part of why we go that way. The downside is you can't really drive a Liberty on the street like you can a G-Force. The Liberty, the way the gears are cut, almost as a safety, if you're going down the track and you lift the throttle and unload the input shaft, it will kick itself out of gear into neutral. So, and you also cannot downshift. So it's really a drag race, straight line, full throttle only kind of transmission. So you have some trade-offs for that.
Sure. Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Mine's just blown with all this.
I wore you out. I'm sorry.
Nope.
I apologize.
No, you definitely didn't wear us out. That is.
So I love your shirt. Can we talk about your shirt for just a minute?
Yeah.
So I should have known you were going to wear that. I wore my matching one, but yours is just like mine. So we're both members of the fraternity, the Delta Lambda fraternity at EFI University, which is the Brotherhood of BTUs. Your shirt and mine say plank owners because we are one of the founding original members that have been there since the very beginning. About I think April will be coming up on 3 years.
Really? Holy man.
Yeah. April will be 3 years. And if you don't mind, like, it's not a sales pitch, but I just want to talk about what it is and why we do it for just a second. My business, June this year, was 20 years that we've been in business teaching people about high performance engines, fuel injection tuning, engine development, and all that kind of stuff. And I've been really, really, really lucky to work with some amazing high end teams from the NASCAR Cup level through NHRA Pro Stock, Pro Modified, NA 10.5 with guys like Robbie Blankenship, now Factory X. I've done all kinds of other stuff, off-road, airplanes, boats. And all throughout the years, I've translated that story and that information that I've learned from that through face-to-face personal interactions in the classroom. And then 2020 happened. And I don't know if you guys were around back then or you remember, but it was a little bit of a weird year for travel. And I was really scared. I'll be honest. I didn't know how a business like mine could succeed and survive when nobody could travel and come sit in the classroom and talk to you. And so I started thinking about, I mean, I'll be honest, one of the things I hate is online training. We offer it at EFI University, and I feel like we offer it at a really high quality, high level. But I just don't like that way of learning, because you could watch every YouTube video on the internet about how to ride a bicycle. But until you get on the bike and ride it, you just don't really know what it's going to feel like. And so I've always believed that learning was a change in behavior that was based on experience. And so when you come to my classroom, we have experience together, right? Like you get to ask questions and stop and think, and then come back the next game. What about this? And then you get to go be on a dyno and actually tune for yourself. And so over the years, I've really paid attention to when students came to our school. And then when they leave, I like to know what they think 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later. And I go to trade shows, PRI, SEMA, all those things, and you run into people and guys go, man, I still have that book, and thank you so much. And, it changed the way I think, and blah, blah, blah. And that's all super great and rewarding. If I ever asked, what's your biggest complaint, though, it's almost always the same complaint about EFI University. And that was, I came and I loved it, and I hated that I had to leave and go home. I just wanted to stay more. But by nature, our classes are based on grownups, right? Like we don't have a 4-year program or a 2-semester program. It's like you're there for a week drinking out of a fire hose, and then you go home. And the biggest complaint was, I wish I could just stay and absorb more of this and be around all the time. So when I was sitting around going, what am I going to do? How am I going to, stay relevant and stay connected and stay in contact with all these people that want to be learners? I thought, how could I give them the opportunity to be at EFI University more? Well, physically, I can't really do that, but virtually I could. And so I came up with this idea, let's start a fraternity where the learning continues beyond the classroom. And so the Delta Lambda fraternity started out of almost desperation of how could I generate some revenue to stay in business, but very quickly turned into this brotherhood of, the definition of a fraternity is a group of like-minded people that are working together for a common cause. And I think that's so apt to what the Delta Lambda fraternity is. There's this whole group of both amateur and professional level racers. There's guys from cup shops in there. I mean, I'm going to have you give your testimonial in just a minute and what you think about it. I have no idea what you're going to say. But we have guys from cup shops. We have, George Price, multi-time national pro stock motorcycle crew chief. You got cylinder head guys at the highest levels. And we got all these people that are lifelong learners that basically pay a monthly subscription to be a part of this fraternity. And then every week we get together and we have these wildly mind-bending discussions. Every one of them gets recorded and archived in a library of content. And then I oftentimes go and I got a thought in my mind. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to turn on the camera and we're going to make a lesson that's 10 or 15 or 20 minutes long to be thought-provoking and teach you something. And we archive those. And those lessons usually turn into conversation starters for the week. And so the Delta Lambda fraternity is really a group of people that never want to stop learning. And this is a way that they could access that unbelievable mountain of knowledge that's available. I went and counted a few months back, Rich, and I think between the recorded Zoom sessions and the lessons, we're getting close to 300 hours of content. Like you could join the Delta Lambda fraternity today and have access to all of that previous content. And you could spend an hour every day watching it. And a year from now, you still wouldn't be caught up because every week we're adding more content. So it's a pretty phenomenal group to be a part of. And I'm so thankful for the people that are there that helped us get through those times, but that honestly have generated the level of commitment and quality that it has that has far surpassed anything I ever imagined we would get. So that's my greatest sales pitch for it. I'm not even trying to be a sales pitch. I'm just bragging about it because I'm so proud of the group. But I would love to know your thoughts. Like, why did you initially join? What kept you from quitting? Why are you still in there? What do you get out of it?
Well, it was really guilt to begin with because, you asked me if you started this group, would I be interested in joining? And I'm like, well, I think so. And then you started the group and I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to have to join now.
Yeah, put my money where my mouth is, right?
Yeah. So, I'll give you a couple of examples of things that I think are really cool. And one of them is, I'll use Nick Agostino as one. So he's pro mod. His car probably makes 4,000 horsepower. And we're talking about harmonic balancers one day. I might even have brought it up. I can't remember. But I started talking about breaking the hubs on harmonic balancers. And so I'm a drag and drive guy, heavy car, totally different than what Nick does. And come to find out, he's changing his hubs out like after, I don't know, I can't remember how many passes, like 10 passes, because they would start to break. And so the similarities in this range of motorsports, I'm like, it's a drag racing car too, but it's substantially different than mine. And so, Nick listened to it, asked lots of questions. We learned from each other. And when he went to PRI and he got a hold of the right guy, because one of the guys on that Wednesday night chat said, you are not talking to the right guy at ATI. And if you talk to the right guy at ATI, you'll understand what we're talking about. So when Nick talked to the guy at ATI, he's like, you're running what? On what? And I think it totally changed his balancer program, because he was literally pulling balancers off. There would be metal transfer. I think Bill may have seen this before. And it would almost be like the hub welding to the crankshaft. And it might have been me who brought it up, but it was Nick who learned from it. Another one is Aaron White. And so Aaron White works for NASCAR companies.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if it's because of me but he's starting to get into some drag and drive stuff. And so now yeah. We lost your video for some reason, Bill. I don't know why, but Aaron's hitting me up in the background, and I would say we've become friends, and he's he appreciates what I'm doing, and but there's just such a wide range. We've had Billy Godbolt on there. He's a member. Joel Dubois, he works for
Musi. He's the cylinder head guy at Musi's.
Yeah, he's a cylinder head for Musi. So it's such a diverse group, and sometimes we have people who are just getting into it and just starting businesses. We've had Samir, another guy on there who's taken what he's learned there and has made great progress. So yeah, it is a great group, and I hate it when I miss the Wednesday night when I'm out traveling, because just about every one of them I learn something. So yeah, it's been a privilege to be part of the group right from the get-go, and so yeah, that's my sales pitch for you, anyways.
Well, that's good to hear. It's a privilege for me to even be associated and let alone lead a group like this. But I want to talk about your shirt real quick too. So at the very top it says plank owner, and a lot of people didn't know what that meant. So I made plank owner collared shirts like this for everybody I think it was after the 2-year mark, everybody that had been there since the very first day or, first week or whatever, and had stayed for those 2 years. So when I was in the Navy, if you were in the Navy, there's a tradition where if the U.S. government commissions a brand new warship, the very first crew to work on that ship are called plank owners. And it comes from way back in the wooden ship days, when they would decommission the ship, you'd take one of the planks home with you because you were a plank owner. Well, I thought that was a cool thing to talk about. So we have all these plank owners that are guys like yourself that have been in our group and supported it from day one. And I guilted them into joining too, but they saw the value in sticking around. So, I'll be honest, it's like a gym membership. A lot of people join because it sounds really great. They stick around for a couple months, but if you don't get involved, you don't get connected, and you don't, use it, you're not going to benefit from it. And so then pretty soon you're going to go, it's just another monthly bill I'm paying and I want to get rid of that. But I don't know a single person that has gotten involved either by, hey, I can't make Wednesday nights, so they watch all the recorded meetings and then they get on our private discussion group forum and ask questions or whatever, or people that are involved. I don't know anybody that says, man, that's a waste of money every month. I wish I could figure out a way to get out of it without losing face or whatever. Or maybe that's the only reason they stay. I'm guilting them into it. But I learned just as much as everybody else because there's such a breadth of experience of different people in there that, like you said, from amateur, professional level, NHRA Cup, dirt track, circle track, everything. And it's great. And very little ego, right? We're talking and sharing about things in our department that is typically a big secret, right? I mean, the last weekend I was actually bringing up data logs from our runs in Vegas on the Factory X car and sharing them with the group, right? Like I don't share that stuff publicly. but we can share it within our group because it's all like-minded people. So pretty cool.
So as someone who's not a member, tell me how I join, what it costs. I know. What it costs. How do I sign up? Where do I go?
Signing up is easy. You just go to the website, EFI101.com, and then through the various links on there, there's a thing that says Delta Lambda, join our fraternity. You can read all about it, what you get, what you don't get. It's basically $99 a month, so it's hugely expensive. But the value far exceeds the expense, right? And you think about most guys come and spend a week with me at class. It typically costs somebody between $7,000 and $10,000. They come to EFI University and they spend a week. The tuition's $6,000 plus their travel, plus a week of hotels and rental cars and meals and all that kind of stuff. And they only get access to me and to EFI University's facilities of research for 5 days. And that's an amazing value. Most people go, oh my God, that's so expensive. Then they leave on Friday and they're like, I would have paid twice that much. If you would have told me what I was going to learn, I'd have paid double, right? But to think about paying less than $1,200 and getting access every single week for an entire year, it seems like chump change. There's nothing to it. We just pay $99 a month. We get access to all the previous 3 years of content that already exists, plus all the new content going forward. That felt pretty sales pitchy, though.
No, you forgot. But wait, there's more.
Yeah, but wait, there's more. You also get to see unlimited reruns of the Clutch Burners podcast for free.
Well, that's right. God, we got to start charging for those.
I'm telling you. Well, you have great people on here, and when you don't have great people, you get guys like me to fill in the blanks. So it's pretty awesome.
Oh, man. Yeah, the first repeat guest, I don't think that's the case. I think you're here for a good reason.
The other one that, and we had questions today, we were going to talk about camshafts. But some of the camshaft data Ben has shown us, and just like the high-speed analysis with the spintron, and how you can literally loft the valve and land it softly and get more lift, and all of the data that Ben has shared with us when it comes to that. And then understanding that there's some secret valve spring stuff going on in the background. Yeah, it's a pretty cool group to be part of. And education, it's pretty much like this podcast every Wednesday. It just blows your mind. Sometimes it's like I gotta go do jiu-jitsu where I'm just thinking about not dying and getting choked out because my brain is hurting.
So, well, I want to just point out what I think the difference is between EFI University and a lot of other really great services out there, from everything that's free on YouTube to other paid sources. For the most part, guys that are doing instruction on all kinds of levels, not just EFI instruction or whatever, they're mostly going out and learning some content through various means, right? Through some experience over the years, or maybe through basic research, and then they're teaching that to other people. And I think that's great. That's a worthwhile service. But I think what's different about that and what we do is we are one of the facilities that are actually doing the real research and development. So we have a spintron, we have high-speed videography, we have the dynos, we have combustion analysis, we've got hub dynos, roller dynos, engine dynos, flow bench, microscopes to do post-mortem analysis and failure analysis, right? Like, so we're like a really high-end race shop, but without a bunch of customers getting in the way of us doing cool stuff. And so our curriculum is always getting better because it's always us learning stuff that we want to teach. And I say that all the time. We really teach the things we most want to learn about. And that's different than a lot of the other offerings where you have this curriculum that's maybe like, well, this is just what we've always told people, but we learned this somewhere and somebody else told us that. Like, we're kind of the stuck up kind of elitists that go out and say, yeah, but what if that's not right? Let's find out. And so we spend all of those dollars that we get from tuitions and subscriptions, we turn right around and waste them on car parts so we can do R&D and learn new stuff and share more. So I think that's what's really different about our facility than a lot of other, classic educational facilities, schools, training seminars, weekend seminars, whatever. I think that's what the difference is.
Nice. So you do camshaft consult. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Bill.
You do camshaft consultation too?
Only for celebrities. Bill had been hitting me up a week or so ago, and I'd been helping him on camshaft stuff. I feel like other than being the world's most amazing crew chief, my real specialty is valve train development and analysis, and really kind of like understanding the big picture of the engine and where the camshaft and valve train and all that fit into it. So I tend to be fairly good at helping guys get their stuff sorted out. So behind the scenes, Bill, you and I have been talking about new camshafts for your project, and I'm sure we'll come up with something really good when we get it there.
Nice.
Yeah, I was harassing Ben the other day, joking with Ben the other day that, I think I've done over 20,000 miles this year alone in my 65 GTO. And just for people's knowledge, it's got like 710 lift. And I haven't changed valve springs. Like I think I'm running the same valve springs that I was running last year. So it's more likely closer to like 35,000 miles on those valve springs. And they've been flawless. I think one of the reasons is when you're basically cruising down the road at high idle at 1,700 RPM doing 80 miles an hour. The cycles are a lot less. I have valve spring sprayers. I have a bunch of things that I think help them live that long life, but that's quite a few miles. So I really have to think about whether or not the other thing I do, and Ben and I were also joking about this, is I do put an on-head tester on there, but really all it's telling me is the spring getting weak? I don't even know if it would tell me that, but is there any broken springs? That's really all it's telling me. But I'm pretty amazed. I know Ben's offered to talk camshafts for me too, and it's like, man, it really isn't broke, and they're working really well for me, and I'm not really having any horsepower issues. It really is just suspension management and power management. What I really need to do is go on a diet. That would be the best thing. Anyways, I just wanted to share that too, that one day I will hit up Ben for some camshaft and probably some springs, and we'll figure out how to make it more efficient when I can make this.
That's really the great part about being a part of the group too, is you've got these other resources now. Instead of just me, you've got Aaron White on valve spring stuff, and you got, Joel on cylinder head stuff, and you got Randy Neal on balancing stuff, and you know what I mean? And so there's just all these guys in there that have specific areas of expertise that now you have a relationship with. You don't have to just like take my word for it and believe me, whatever I say, and I think that's really valuable.
It is interesting too when people are talking about something on the group and they might actually be way in left field, and there's somebody from the group that's like, I don't think that's really what's going on there. And it's quite entertaining to have that level of people challenging each other in a positive way, and to think differently about it. And you could see there's lots of aha moments in there. But anyways, yeah, it's great.
That's awesome. I may have to sign up.
I've been hitting you up for a while. I should have told Ben, make sure you say no to Bill until he signs up, but I knew you wouldn't.
I missed another opportunity to extort someone.
Dang it.
Not good at this salesmanship stuff. I can make your car go, but I suck at selling stuff.
Nice. Oh, well, anything else about the Factory X you want to talk about?
Other than I really hope that more people watch it and get into it, and I'd love to see the class grow. It's a really exciting class. There's all this talk about, oh God, it's going to replace Pro Stock. It's not really meant to do that. It's not intended to do that, but it is kind of what in the 70s Pro Stock started out to be. You could go out on Sunday and watch cars race that look just like the ones that are in the parking lot that you could go get on Monday morning. They're steel roof and quarter, exact body dimensions of Copo Camaros, Cobra Jet Mustangs, and drag pack Dodges. And so they look and seem like accessible cars, and a lot of guys are doing them up in these classic, paint schemes and stuff that look like old school. I saw one the other day, somebody's doing like a Sox and Martin tribute. We got a Bob Glidden tribute. Ours is the Rod Shop. There's all this modern nostalgia going on, and it's just cool to watch. Not to mention they're stupid fast. These are high 6-second, 200-mile-an-hour cars with 5-speed transmissions and clutches and small tire. So what's not to love, right?
Yeah. And how do people watch it?
On NHRA, so Fox, FS1, Fox Sport Networks, and all that kind of stuff. So all the normal NHRA type outlets they have, I think, like NHRA TV. You can watch live timing and all that kind of stuff if you're patient enough to wait all day. But yeah, it's for all intents and purposes, it's kind of the big show. So wherever you find NHRA, you can find Factory X. Factory Experimental is the official name, but we call it Factory X.
Nice. All right.
Yeah. So I'm temporarily the world's most winning crew chief in Factory X, but let's see, I've won 3 of 4. So if you give us another 3 or 4 races, I'm sure somebody else will knock me off the podium. But hey, hang on to that for as long as you can. The fact is, I won the very first ever Factory X race at the U.S. Nationals in Indy. It was pretty cool. Last night, my daughter and I were watching that Snake and Mongoose movie from like 2013 or 14, and it's all about the big go, the U.S. Nationals. Everybody wants to win Indy, and so for me to have a Wally sitting on my shelf from Indy is pretty dang cool, man.
That's super cool. Yeah,
proud of that.
I don't think we even dare get into camshafts because that's like a whole nother episode. So
do you have another hour? I mean, we could do it.
Oh, we do. I have another hour. Do you, Rich? But I think it'll take more than 1 hour.
Or I could come back again and be the most attended guest ever on the show. Like really solidify my record,
I think the whole camshaft valve train thing deserves way more than an hour.
I think we could do several hours, no problem. And clutch guys talking about camshafts is always kind of funny.
Yes, exactly. Let's see. We've got some audience questions. Yeah, we do that. Go for it, Rich.
Well, it's actually something that I was just thinking about asking you too. So this question, this is not me for all my Pontiac guys out there. I'm building a stock bottom end LS to run on methanol. Thinking about running the stock heads without water in them. What are common issues you see running jacketed heads without water? Never, probably haven't done anything like that, eh?
Well, I have. It's not that uncommon for people to do, especially like big block guys that are doing methanol. It doesn't come without its hazards, though. One of the challenges to doing that, if you're running methanol, that means you're running some kind of boost and you're probably making pretty big amount of power. You got to understand that the way that cylinder head was designed was to transfer heat from the combustion chamber into the water jacket and then take that heat out to the radiator. Without anything in there but air, you just have dead space. It's really easy to thermally overload that cylinder head and liquefy it. So you do have to be a little bit cautious there. You have to run a little bit more pedantic, kind of softer tune-up than you probably could if you had water in it or if it was solid. But it can be done, and I highly encourage you to do it. The fact that you started out with stock bottom end is like, all right, well, you're not afraid to break stuff, so let's get after it and see what happens.
Just on that note, Big Chief Justin Shearer, so he runs a solid block, and heads the same as mine, but that he just runs water through the heads. That's all. Mm-hmm. That's all he does.
Yeah, and, you could definitely do that.
Yeah, and he describes how when he's running M1 or whatever, you can literally give it gas to cool down the water in the head, like the amount of volume of fuel that's going down there that helps cool it. So yeah, you're probably better off to be not in the block and just running the heads and at least keep the heads cool.
Yeah.
Second question, how much power have you seen out of a piston ring change?
Well, let's be fair. So not huge numbers. However, generally when I'm doing that, it would be going from something like a 0.9 millimeter ring to a 0.7 or a 0.6. And so there's probably only barely into the double digits of power between those, right? On a naturally aspirated engine that's got, let's say, a 0.9 millimeter ring and going to a 0.7, there's maybe 7 to 12 horsepower. However, going from an old school like 1/16, 1/16, 3/16 package or something like that, down to these little tiny skinny things that we run now, it could easily be 25, 30 or more horsepower.
And is that something a guy could run on a street motor? An old school motor with
the really small stuff you might not want to, because the mechanical tension is so low that they really don't work that well when there's not good combustion pressure. So when you got a lot of vacuum because the throttle's partially closed or you're on and off the throttles, I may not think about a really low tension ring package that way. But that said, there's no reason you couldn't run those rings in an old school type engine that was designed for racing purposes. But the crazy part is you start talking about these little rings. So I'm doing a naturally aspirated big block for a guy right now, and it uses a top ring that's 23.6 thousandths of an inch thick. Ooh. Tiny little thing, right? And only about 100 thousandths in the radial. And so most of your tangential spring load comes from the radial. And when you don't have a lot of radial, there's not a lot of springiness. So what'll happen is you put the ring on the piston, and you grab the piston and you hold it. So you're trying to, put it down. You got a tapered ring compressor. So you take your tapered ring compressor and you set your piston down in there and you let go. Well, the ring falls out before it ever even goes down into the taper. So we actually typically have to take our ring compressors and modify them in the mill with slots in them, so you can hold your fingers farther down until it gets deeper into the taper to hold those rings in. So the advantage of that is super low friction and really high point loading on the ring. So you get great cylinder sealing and good conformity with a non-round bore. The downside is you're heavily reliant on cylinder pressure to keep that ring pushed out against the cylinder wall, because it doesn't have any tangential spring load, no force on its own mechanically.
Right.
So maybe not a great choice for a purely street driven application where you have a lot of high vacuum with the throttle closed. You might get some oil consumption that way.
So I have a couple of other ring questions. And what, you hear a bit about these gapless rings, either second or top. What's your experience with those?
They work great. The gapless rings have been around forever. Total Seal obviously makes those as a company, and there are some applications where they're really, really good, especially stuff where you have a lot of dilution of the charge. So you get a lot of methanol, and it's trying to wipe oil and wash oil off cylinder walls and that kind of stuff. In an application where really, really, really low friction is not the main goal and cylinder sealing is, I think that it makes a great solution. So maybe something with lower RPM and larger bores and lots of cylinder pressure. I'm thinking like diesel or tractor pull, stuff like that. When you get into these really high winding, like small displacement or even large displacement engines where you have really high piston speeds and you're really trying to cut down on friction, then the small ring makes a lot of sense. And so typically we're also pairing those on engines that are pretty much going after it for power, meaning we got like dry sumps and high vacuum and stuff like that. We're trying to create a really big differential across the ring between top and bottom. So you got a lot of cylinder pressure and a lot of vacuum below it. So the difference is really high. Those little rings tend to work very well. But I'll give you an example. If you were building an LS engine, let's say your standard, 4-inch stroke, 125 bore LS, and you use like standard 1.1, 1.1, and then like a 3 millimeter oil ring with a standard tension expander. If you put all 8 pistons in the engine and you tighten all the bolts and all that kind of stuff, and just the short block, if you put your torque wrench on it, it will typically take somewhere around 25 to 27 foot-pounds of torque, breakaway torque, and then around 20 or so to keep it moving. So if you take your torque wrench and go all the way around and look at it, that's about right. We take one of those engines and start trimming stuff down and getting rid of the friction with those little rings. And you run those I've run rings as small as 20 thousandths thick by 80 thousandths radial with a 2 millimeter oil ring, and then we run an expander that's 10 thou smaller than the bore. You'll get down to around 4 to 6 foot-pounds of breakaway torque, and then 3 to 4 pounds to keep it in motion.
Wow.
So I realize those aren't real numbers for gain torque that you get on the dyno, but it does tell you a lot about the parasitic drag in the engine. And it does make a difference when you're trying to get every last bit of power. But you're very reliant on cylinder pressure and vacuum.
So let's talk about the oil ring or the oil ring package. On a setup like Rich and I, drag and drive type stuff, if you were building one, would you do low tension, standard tension, or high tension on the oil ring pack?
That's a really good question. I am building one, by the way, so we'll have to wait and see what I actually put in there. But there are high tension, standard tension, and low tension rings, and then of course you can tweak and play with those as you see fit. One of the things that we'll often do is put just the oil ring on the piston, and turn it upside down and insert it in the bore all the way at the bottom. And then you can take something like a fish scale and you can hook it onto the wrist pin, and you can gently pull all the way up, and you can get a reading for how much force or how much tangential load it takes to do that. And then what you can do is you can play with expanders. So for example, if you had a 250 bore and you ordered standard tension rings, well, you could take that expander out of that pack and order the same exact expander, but instead of a 250 bore, order it for a 245, 5,000 smaller. And so what that does is it has less spring load pushing out, and you can start telling a real difference. Now, there is a balance of too little is not enough, right? It'll start to consume oil, and it'll have smoke and things like that, especially on the two-step rev limiter on the starting line, things like that. But a lot of it comes down to dry sump or wet sump. And a lot of that comes down to what type of fuel. Am I using methanol where there's going to be a lot of fuel wash, or gasoline? Is it going to be race gas, unleaded, leaded? Those things all speak to what the honing on the cylinder block needs to look like. And then that really tells me how much ring tension I can get away with. So probably something like a middle of the road is where you're going to end up on a drag week deal. Not some ultra low tension thing that's going to consume oil all week, and not some high tension thing that you would need on a nitrous or a methanol powered thing with 70 weight oil in it. So that's probably the least answer I could give you, right? Too many variables.
Perfect.
Okay, well, this next question will be interesting. What is the ideal RPM to launch at? And then the two bullets below are closer to peak torque or horsepower, and what is the ideal RPM to shift at?
Ooh. Okay. This is going to be another one of those where you're going to get a not answer. But what I'm looking at is the total package. So can you leave at peak torque, or do you need to leave below that, or do you need to leave above that? So much of that depends on the RPM range of the engine. If we're talking about an engine with an RPM range that goes, to 6,800 max, and you've got to leave at 2,800, you're going to be driving through peak torque as you're locking the clutch up. And so your tune-up's going to change a lot. If we're talking about a pro stock engine where I let the clutch out at 67 to 6,900 and I go to 10,500, you're going to flash through peak torque. The peak torque on a pro stock car is probably 8,000 RPM, and your clutch is probably going to lock up at 8 to 82, and that's the last time you're ever going to see it. You're going to go to 10.5, change gears, and fall back to 9. You're going to go to 10.5, change gears, fall back to 92. So there's a lot of variables there. It's hard for me to give you a straight answer. What's the best RPM is the one that gives the car the lowest 60 foot times, right? Finding that is going to be different based on what gear ratios you have, how much traction's available, and so on and so forth. When to shift, though, is a really interesting one. And that really comes down to doing the math. So me, I love spreadsheets. I have a spreadsheet that I use that calculates the total amount of force available at the tire. And that's one of the things that I do to have my data logger actually calculate power as well. I'll talk about that in just a second. But basically what you have to do is you have to take your dyno sheet and you have to look at across your range of RPM, how much torque the engine makes at each particular RPM. If you then multiply that torque times your gear ratio in the transmission, and then multiply it again times your differential ratio, but then divide it by the radius of the wheel and tire package, you'll get the total amount of force that's available at the tire contact patch with the surface. If you take that number and divide it by the total mass of the vehicle, what you get is the total potential for G-force. And you will see that you'll have a different amount of potential G-force available all throughout each gear and the RPM range, depending on what the shape of the power curve and torque curve look like. If you've got a really flat torque curve or a really peaky one, it's going to change the total amount of G-force that you could achieve in your package. And so sometimes, depending on the gear ratio split that you have, it will make sense to go all the way to redline, because when you move to the next gear, you have such a big gear split that you lose so much torque that the car goes slower. Other times, when you fall back to that RPM range, you've been so far past the peak torque number that simply falling back and getting more engine torque and less multiplication through the transmission can still be a net gain in G-force available. So this is another one of those answers where you got to put in the time to do the math and do the work to get that answer. But what you will typically find is the right RPM to shift at will be different for each gear. And so you're going to have to figure that out for your package.
It's interesting. Hey, Bill, especially with the strategy that a bunch of guys, including Jonathan Atkins, who's got the record, they shift at the same RPM every time, because that's how they're unloading the transmission to get them into the next gear. But
Me too.
yeah, same as you, right?
Yeah, same as me.
So like, for example, there's nothing that says, so what he does is he drives it right into the limiter, which unloads the input shaft, and he changes gears. I actually have no problem with that whatsoever, except that you don't have to do that at the same RPM every time. You could just build a table that, depending on which gear it's in, changes the limiter, and you could do exactly what I'm saying to do.
Yeah. Who knows? Jonathan might be doing that too. I'm not sure.
He seems like a pretty smart guy. I would be surprised if he wasn't doing something along those lines.
Yeah.
Same thing with my shift lights. They changed based on the gear ratio I have in the car and based on the driver. So one of the things that we log is the shift light, so I can see how long the light was on and measure my human factor. How long it took his eyes to see the light and his hands to move, right? And as you can imagine, the light is typically on a lot longer in first gear than it is in fourth gear, because your rate of acceleration is so much lower in fourth gear that you get a lot of time to focus and go, okay, there's the light, move. In first gear, when your engine's doing 5,000 RPMs per second, it doesn't take you very long to get from 6,000 to 10,000, right? So, or something like that, right? And so then, like, for example, we were looking at our Ford Mustang Factory X car that we have for Stephen Bell the other day, and he moved the lever out of first gear into second gear. And when it got into second gear, 0.7 of a second later, the shift light came back on, to give you an idea how fast these cars accelerate. So, the light came back on simply because we were looking at how long his brain takes to get the gear change to happen. And so however long that takes, let's say that it takes you 0.3 of a second to make the change happen. I have to look at what the rate of change in engine speed is to make sure that I match up how long it's going to take you to react to get the engine to shift at the correct RPM, which of course with a lever clutch is extremely important. If you shift too late, if you shift too early, you don't get as much counterweight force. If you shift too late, you're up into the limiter and the car slows down because you're not accelerating. So we work really hard to make those shift points exactly precise in our packages.
I'm surprised Bill hasn't asked you this question, so I'll ask it for you. How long does it take for a gear change?
In a Liberty car?
Yeah.
Or a normal car?
Yeah. No, in a Liberty.
About 120 milliseconds.
So
what is that? Just over 1/10 of a second.
0.0120. Is that what you're saying?
No, that would be 12. So 0.1 to 0.12 is about how long it takes the change to happen.
Oh, that's about where we're at, Rich.
That's yeah. So I have mine set at 0.12 is what my cut is.
So keep in mind, I think it actually happens faster than that, but that's the way the data is parsed and kind of filters out the values. If you look at the very, very top of the gear change to the very bottom of the next, it's probably around 1/10 of a second, but yeah, it's pretty quick. And it really shouldn't be a whole lot slower in your transmission, given that they're faceplated and you're not using the clutch to shift. It shouldn't be a lot longer.
Yeah. So what I've seen on mine, and I use, we'll call it the Atkins technique, where, the limiter comes on, and then when you make the shift and the RPM drops to a certain point, it turns off and the power comes back on. So I typically see the slowest shift is about 0.12, but I have seen the quickest at a 0.04.
Yeah. So some of that again is the where it syncs up in the data. So I would guess that it's probably taking these face-plated transmissions or a Liberty transmission probably in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 milliseconds. So 0.04 to 0.05. But how long the engine /clutch /drivetrain can move and how long it takes them to respond to that gear change is, probably twice as long at a minimum.
Sure. Okay.
So
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, it's pretty fast.
Yeah.
Think about the rate of negative acceleration that your timing chain has to endure when you do that. So we measure that with math channels. We do the derivative of engine speed and time, and you'll see that, like, for example, in low gear, we might be going up close to 5,000 RPMs per second and maybe 4,000 in second, maybe 3,000 in third. But when you change gears, it's about negative 18,000 RPMs per second. The engine's trying to go backwards. So you're trying to rip the timing chain in half and rip the rods off the crankshaft and the pistons off the wrist pins. And It's better if you don't think about it.
It's better if you just don't shift, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A single gear would be great. It takes a lot of power to move a car that way.
Yes. So we've already done a podcast with you. So Rich, do you want to vote to bypass the TKO round?
Yeah, I see Travis had another question from the audience there.
Oh, okay.
Was it, how long is this going to last?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought they'd be getting bored by now.
Okay, so if I never took my car to the dyno, can I calculate power per RPM using fuel flow? And I know you're going to say yes, but I would say that also would not the air fuel ratio being way rich or way lean have a factor on that?
That is the problem with doing it that way, yes.
And my second question would be, and I know Rich and I have used this, can you not calculate the mile per hour and the weight of the car to come up with wheel horsepower?
Yes, you can. In fact, one of the checks that I do to make sure all my math is working properly is I use the G meter. You guys have G meters in most of these data loggers, right?
I do, yes.
So what you can do is, remember earlier I talked about you take the torque the engine makes times the gear ratio on the trans times the differential divided by the wheel mass, and you get total force of the tire. Take that total force and divide it by the weight of the vehicle, and you get potential G. Well, potential G is nice, but actual G is what matters. And so what you can do is you can take your data logger and look at what your actual G force was at any point in the run, and then divide that back out, just like you did going the other way. Instead of multiplying everything, divide it and take your G times your vehicle weight divided by your ratios and so on and so forth, and you'll get actual power and torque. And so then what you can do is compare those numbers to your calculated values based on airflow, fuel flow, whatever thing you want to use. And you'll find that it's pretty darn accurate, because Isaac Newton came up with these laws, not Ben Strader, right? He said force equals mass times acceleration. So if we know your acceleration rate by measuring it, and we know the mass of the vehicle, then we can measure the force. And so that's a really great kind of check that you can do to see if your other math is working correctly. The one thing you have to watch out for, though, is for example, if I look at my engine torque in high gear, which I like to do because it's 1-to-1, right? Then I only have to deal with my differential. It'll be relatively flat across high gear, my calculated engine torque, right? But if I look at the torque value that I create through backwards calculating my G meter, it'll start out in high gear and it'll just go down at a slow angle like this. Well, that's because while the engine torque is staying the same, the resistance from aerodynamic load on the car is going up. And so my potential to create G is going down. But if you take the average all the way from start to finish of high gear, you'll find that it's very close to my calculated torque value.
It makes sense. Yeah.
It's just math.
All right.
What else you got, Rich?
So much more. But
you have exceeded my limit of knowledge that I have for knowing about stuff. Now I have to make it up from here on out.
Yeah, I highly doubt that. No, I think it's been an hour and a half or 2.5 hours.
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours. So, yeah, that's probably our audience is probably their brain is hurting already. So once again, I mean, it's just fantastic having you on here, and each one of these we do, the math kicks in a little bit more and reinforces more and more that, even making up your own data log sheet to track what you need to make it more convenient so that you actually log every change that you make. Like on Death Week, it was only 4 8th-mile race days, so substantially different than I had done before, but just did not do a good job of recording data. So it just reinforces how critical it is. And this podcast specifically, especially learning from a new crew chief, and how to use that data and keep that book. I know that, I was thinking earlier today about having Justin on here to really talk about chassis, because, he's very meticulous too, where he'll go out and make a hit and then he's piling over the data for an hour. He won't go out and make 10 hits in a night. He'll make 2 hits in a night and then look over the data and, try to find where the miss was or why it worked good. And So this one really reinforced for me that it's just critical to make sure you're writing that stuff down. Take that 5-10 minutes. I'm usually waiting because of my my Mega Squirt's all Bluetooth, so it takes a little longer to download the files. So I got lots of time. There's no excuse other than laziness. So,
well, it's really one of those things that like the transition for me from tuner to crew chief was relatively easy from that side of like the car setup side, because I have so many years of experience of collecting and analyzing the data. Really, it was the extra pressure of leadership and responsibility that made the difference between tuner and crew chief, right? I still had to do all the same things I've always done. It was just a matter of now it wasn't like doing it all and then taking it to the crew chief and going, this is what I think you should do. And you go, yeah, well, I'm going to do it my way anyway, right? Like, so it was nice to have that, what's the right word? Autonomy, but also came with way more weight on your shoulders if you screwed up and got it wrong. And so luckily I only did that a couple of times this year, and we didn't win all the races, but most of them.
Just a quick question. You ever have a draggy? Do you guys ever use a draggy at all?
No, but only because we have essentially that same thing in the G meter of the race pack, right? Like, so, while it's not specifically set out to spit out all those numbers, because our car primarily only ever lives on a drag strip, we get a printout with those numbers. So I got nothing against it. I think they work great. It's a wonderful device when we go, not the X cars, but when I go consult with like no prep guys and things like that, where there are no times, it's awesome. Works great. So we just don't have one in that car because we don't really need it.
Yeah. Like you were just talking about the G line. And so that orange line or red line, I don't know what it looks like on your guys' screen, is pretty much exactly, and you can see how soft I'm leaving before it actually gets to peak G's, before it slowly starts to drop. But it can be a great tool or a really sad tool when you get to the top of the track and you're like, man, that was great. And then you look at your draggy and it's like, really? Like it was 9.0, it wasn't an 890?
No, the only thing worse than a dyno is a draggy.
Yeah. Yeah. Extremely accurate, though. If people out there don't have one, and if anything, I have a lot of data in there because I always turn it on and always have it. But anyways, it's even when you run an 8th mile, it's just for shits and giggles. It's kind of funny to see you run a 950 when you let off at the 8th, and you're like, man, I would have been so happy with a 950. It's 5 years ago.
It's funny, like what that tells you is just how important those first 3 rotations of the tire are. If you get that right, you can shut off at 1,000 feet, and a lot of people go, wow, that was a good run. But you cannot go poorly to the 60 foot and make it up in the rest of the run.
Yep. The short track is so important. I've learned that over and over again, that it is so important. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, let's put out a huge thanks to Stick Shift Nation for hosting the podcast.
Yeah.
You can find the Clutch Burners podcast on basically all the podcast platforms. I don't know, 9 or 10 of them. And please head over to stickracing.com, grab yourself a Stick Shift Nation shirt or sticker. And I'm going to do a couple of self-plugs here. I'm really excited, and I know I'm going to see you both at PRI. I'm doing a booth for the Bank Shift Billy at PRI. Rich is going to be helping me out with that a little bit, and so is Travis. So we're all going to be at the booth, which is 3210. And I'm also at a little bit of prodding from Travis and Rich. Doing more videos on the Bank Shift Billy YouTube page. So please go over there and check them out. You might find them interesting, informative, and maybe a little funny.
Hey, real quick, Bill, I'm going to be at PRI as well, and I'm going to be giving 2 different presentations there. One of them I'll be doing, I think it's on, you'll have to look up the dates. I think it's Friday with Billy Godbold and Lake Speed Jr. Nice. We did a really great one last year, and we're going to come back for another one this year on surface treatment and understanding surface technology and how it applies to racing engines. And then the day before PRI starts on Wednesday, the AERA is putting on a new thing called EPIC, which is kind of like the old AETC conferences. And there's going to be some really great presentations there. I'm going to be there talking about using combustion analysis to do engine development work. So sharing some cool data logs and files from combustion analysis and what you can do with it. So if you guys are already going to PRI, make sure you get in a day early and come watch me at the Epic share with you how we do engine development.
That sounds awesome. Well, we might do that because I'm swinging through Kansas to pick up Travis on the way. So
perfect. Yeah,
leave early.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Real quick, this is Travis. Ben, so you share a ton of top secret data with us. I wanted to share some that might flatter you as well. So while your podcast episode was one of our longest, I think it might be the longest, the engagement rate, the average engagement time for that podcast was the longest. So people stayed engaged through that podcast by far the longest. So definitely don't mind the long ones. Really appreciate your insight, stuff like that.
So Travis, you're talking about the first one we did.
Yeah.
Oh, right on.
So
okay, cool.
Still to this day, people listen to your episode to the end most often.
Or re-listen to it.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. That's super cool.
A lot of replays, re-listens, things like that. A lot of questions and interest in a second edition. So we very much appreciate your insight as far as that goes.
Yes.
Well, that's flattering.
Also, if you would plug your social media or whatever you've got going on as well.
Yeah, sure thing. So start with our website, which is EFI101.com. And then EFI University is our Facebook. And then, of course, we have all the other Instagram and TikTok and all that. I'll be honest, I don't actually do a lot of those ones. I have a professional guy doing that for me because I'm so dumb when it comes to that stuff, which seems funny for a guy that's so technical about the car side. It's just that cars are interesting and computers really aren't. So, but yeah, we're on the social media outlets. And man, thanks, Travis. That really means a lot to me. It's like if I was going to be super honest with you guys, I would tell you that my biggest struggle getting named crew chief this year was actually believing I could do it. You know, I spent all these years just thinking like, everybody already knows the stuff and what I'm doing really isn't all that relevant. Nobody cares about it. When you hear that, like people listen to the whole thing and like it's 2.5 hours, they're still listening. Man, that's pretty cool. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me personally. And so makes me want to come back and do more of it.
Yeah, I will say a lot of friends of mine, they talk about the first podcast. So when they see your name pop up again, they'll be super excited to, whether they're going around in circles on tractors or long drives or whatever, I'm sure they'll be, the challenging part is sometimes you got to stop and write some stuff down. So hard to do that.
Well, I hope they'll enjoy all 2.5 hours of it, and I hope that gave them some value and some things to think about, and maybe a different perspective.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, don't hang up yet, but thank you very much. And I think we wrap this one up.